Chapter 690. Tai 2. Are you really going to bet on Sir 2? Didn't you bet on that person previously? Now that Sir 2 has lost 2 rounds, are you going to bet on him? In my opinion, Sir 2 is in danger this time. Have you heard about what happened in the north? Back then, that person sent something to the Great Xia barracks and killed the commander of the Great Xia army. I don't care about that. I never look at these things when I bet. I only look at the odds. Whichever odds are higher. If you don't bet, then bet on a big one. All in. All in. If you win, book the entire brothel. And if you lose, go back to the mountains to hunt. A dark-skinned, fierce-looking youth was beaming with joy as he stood on the street. Your family is really strange. Everyone has a monthly allowance, but you still want to go hunting in the mountains. A youth laughed. My father said that strength is gained through fighting, not through training. He fought all the way from the mountains to Lawn City like this. He always said that if you can't even beat the beast cubs in the mountains, then you are useless. 7 days passed in a flash. During these 7 days, 2 huge concrete cubes with a length, width, and height of 10 meters were built 5 kilometers outside the city. These 2 concrete cubes were made of stone concrete. They were made from stone and concrete with a diameter of half a meter. Their extremely strong hardness and huge size were sufficient for testing. 7 days later, everyone gathered outside the city again. A group of people looked at the huge metal pipe placed at the side and whispered to each other, guessing the function of the metal pipe. Is it a weapon? Is it used to smash people? I don't know. Who do you think will win this time? Logically speaking, I could definitely think that Sir 2 will win, but after the 2 rounds of competition, I don't know anymore. Everyone nodded. Cardinal Heaven experts were the pinnacle in the hearts of the Aboriginals. They were the top experts. If someone was said to be able to defeat a Cardinal Heaven expert in the past, they would have laughed hysterically. However, after the 2 rounds of competition, everyone's thinking had changed. The principal of the Black Bamboo Academy was indeed skilled. Of course, if they were to fight, it was obvious that the Cardinal Heaven expert would win. However, if they were to compete, the principal of the Black Bamboo Academy, who had endless tricks up his sleeves, would be unpredictable. He's here. His Majesty is here. While everyone was talking, someone suddenly shouted. Everyone immediately dispersed and made way for the Empress's imperial chariot. This time, no matter who wins or loses, let's end it like this. In the carriage, the Empress reclined on a thick animal skin and held a copy of One Piece in her hand. She didn't even raise her head as she spoke to Rinpoche. I know that you need to establish your authority if you want them to change their minds. However, according to your words, you can't always take advantage of sheep's fur, and you can't always grab him and bully him. Got it. Rinpoche didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Yes, it was indeed not a good idea to bully someone. In any case, he was a Cardinal Heaven expert and one of the top experts in the Aboriginals. Tu Hong was probably doubting his life now. The carriage stopped, and Rinpoche jumped down first. He turned around and extended his hand to help the Empress up. However, when he turned around, he realized that the Empress had already disappeared. When he turned his head again, he realized that the Empress was already sitting on the chair. Greetings, Your Majesty. Everyone bowed in unison. Well, get ready to start, the Empress said faintly and shifted her gaze back to the comic in her hand. Xian just stepped forward and said, I won't say much about the rules. There are 2 concrete blocks in front, and the winner will be determined by the degree of destruction. Sir 2, Principal Run, get ready. Sir 2, you first. Rinpoche chuckled. Tu Hong glanced at him, didn't say a word, and strode toward the 2 huge blocks in front of him. These 2 blocks were the result of the prisoners of war working day and night. They had been built the day before yesterday, and Rinpoche had seen them personally. He had sufficient confidence in them. As he got closer, the blocks became bigger and bigger in his field of vision. Tu Hong's body was like a tiny dot in front of the blocks, and the contrast was extremely strong. 2 meters in front of the blocks almost occupied his entire field of vision. In front of him was a city wall, and it was much thicker than the city wall. Tu Hong's clothes exploded, and green veins began to crawl all over his body. Then, the fine veins turned into a greenish-gray color and wandered around Tu Hong's body. Everyone in the distance could feel the strong aura. Those who were weaker could even feel the pressure on their hearts. Tu Hong took a deep breath, raised his arms slightly, and struck a pose with his fists up and down. Then, he stomped on the ground and soared into the sky. Countless shadows of his fists smashed into the middle of the blocks. Bang! With his fists as the landing point, the gravel flew in all directions with a piercing sound. A huge pit that was 1 meter deep appeared in the middle of the block, and cracks spread in all directions from the center point. Crack, crack, cracks flowed on the concrete block, and small pieces of rock peeled off. The moment Tu Hong's feet landed on the ground, boom! The 10-meter-tall concrete cube shattered with a loud bang, turning into countless gravel that fell down. Rinpoche stood in the distance and smacked his lips. This scene was indeed very shocking, both visually and in terms of the destructive power contained within. Such a huge cube was actually shattered in a single move. Furthermore, it was solid and not hollow. It was a concrete block of 1,000 cubic meters. This wasn't something that could be achieved with a few thousand kilograms of strength. Fortunately, he had never underestimated the martial arts in this world. Even though he was amazed, he could still accept it. Li Fu could collapse a mountain with a single strike. If he really looked at everything in this world with a scientific perspective, he would have gone crazy a long time ago. He had to accept that many times this world simply couldn't be viewed with the current scientific perspective. Hearing the exclamations from the sidelines and looking at the landslide in front of him, Tu Hong smiled. Then, the skin on his body exploded and blood spurted 3 meters high. His entire body fell to the sky. I should be able to win this time, right? Li Fu thought to himself as he looked at the sky above his head. After burning his essence and blood twice, his strength hadn't recovered to its peak. In order to win this time, he had to go all out. Fortunately, he was prepared this time. Tu Wan immediately brought Tu Hong back to the clinic for treatment. Sir Ren, it's your turn. Tu Wan turned to look at Rinpoche and said in a deep voice, I'm already preparing. Rinpoche nodded and was assembling his killer weapon this time, the 300mm mortar. The barrel was brought back from Earth by Rinpoche and was made of alloy. In order to reduce the accuracy and range, the barrel was shortened by a lot, and the weight of the barrel was reduced to 600 kilograms. The support frame and chassis were rushed by the Ministry of Works. The bipod weighed 1,700 kilograms, while the chassis weighed 3,800 kilograms. Naturally, there was only one shooting angle. Based on this angle, the range was 1,500 meters. As for the shell, Rinpoche only prepared one. It weighed 960 kilograms and contained 450 kilograms of CL-20 explosives. Its power was 16 times that of TNT of the same weight. In other words, this shell was equivalent to the power of 3 tons of TNT. Chapter 691. Rinpoche calmly watched as the craftsmen from the Ministry of Works installed the mortar. The base weighed close to 2 tons, and 2 people could carry it. Home of 2 feet weighed 1,700 jin, and 1 person could carry it on his shoulders. Sometimes Rinpoche felt that it was a waste of talent to not send these people to build the pyramids. All the parts were made by the Ministry of Works with the blueprints, and the card slots at the joints were all hand-hammered out. Although there were some minor problems, it was no big deal when it was installed. If there was a problem, such as the connection buckle being a little too big, the craftsman would hammer it down and rub it with an iron bar, and it would fit in. There was nothing wrong with the saying that strength creates miracles. It took half an hour for the mortar to be installed. Your Majesty, let everyone retreat, Rinpoche said. The Empress shifted her gaze away from the manga and narrowed her eyes as she looked at his face. The sunlight behind Rinpoche was somewhat dazzling. We're already so far away. Isn't that enough? The Empress asked as she pointed at the concrete cube in the distance. It's too close. I'm afraid of an accident. It's best to retreat 2,000 steps, Rinpoche said. In order to make it easier for them to watch, They stood no more than 200 meters away from the concrete block. It was too close, and it was too easy for them to be accidentally injured. Furthermore, most of the components of this mortar were manufactured in Dayo. If something went wrong, such as the landing point being slightly off target, he was afraid that half of the imperial court would be wiped out. The Cardinal Heaven bigwigs would be fine, but half of the officials would be dead or injured. Even if there were no problems, the destructive range of the fragment was not small, and it would definitely include this place. The Empress looked at him suspiciously and asked, "Don't tell me you used a nuclear warhead?" With regards to the might of a nuclear bomb, the Empress was still extremely fearful. That thing wasn't something that a human could withstand head-on. If she was far away from the explosion, she was confident that she could escape. If she had been too close to the explosion site, she could clearly remember the video and photos she had seen at the time. The consequences would have been very serious. It's not a nuclear bomb. That control is too strict. They won't let go no matter what. However, the power of this cannonball isn't weak. Otherwise, how can everyone be convinced? Rinpochian said. The Empress looked suspiciously at Rinpochian again before calling Xianzhe over. Get everyone to take 1,500 steps back. Yes. Xianzhe didn't ask any questions and turned around to make the arrangements. After that, the crowd at the back started to get chaotic. Although they didn't know what His Majesty had planned, they gradually retreated. Could it be that that person's moves are too powerful, and Your Majesty is afraid of hurting us? Lu Royale said in a strange tone as she walked backward with her hands behind her back. Who knows? Hong Xian said indifferently. There must be a reason why His Majesty made such arrangements. We'll just have to wait and see. Then he said coldly, Young Sparrow Hawk, you've gone too far. You even dare to question His Majesty. Lu Royale was stunned for a moment. Then she said softly, I'm sorry. It's not that I'm sorry. It's just that you're in danger. Hong Xian shook her head and warned. I'll be careful. After everyone had retreated to the back, Rinpochian got someone to clear the space in front and behind the mortar. He then opened the box and carefully took out a mortar shell that was the size of a human. Although he knew that this thing wouldn't explode easily, holding such a big bomb made him feel uneasy. Under everyone's gaze, Rinpochian carefully stuffed the human-sized cannonball into the cannon barrel. He then took a few steps back and shouted, Sir, Sir! Sir stepped forward with a puzzled look on his face. Why was he being called at this time? Pull this trigger when I give the order. Rinpochian pointed to a trigger on the side of the rear. Understood. Sure, nodded. Be careful, Rinpochian reminded him. After hearing this, Sherhu immediately took it seriously. Rinpochian ran to the side for more than 10 meters, covered his ears with both hands, and said, Pull the trigger. Bang! There was a loud sound, and everyone around felt the ground shake. Those with sharp eyes could see a black object rising into the sky along with the smoke. After all, the initial speed of this mortar shell wasn't fast. The group of people looked at the sky and then at the cube in front of them, waiting to see what would happen. After a few breaths, everyone vaguely saw a small dot fall from the sky and make the sound of a fist tearing through the air. Boom! The sound of the explosion was so loud that it almost deafened everyone. Following the explosion, everyone felt the ground shake violently, as if an earth dragon was turning over. In front of them, where there were originally 2 concrete cubes, a huge fireball mixed with smoke rose into the air. The shockwave set off a heat wave that rushed in all directions. It was like a grade 7 or 8 gale, causing some of the weaker people to lose their balance and crash into each other. Gravel flew more than 1,000 meters from the center of the explosion and smashed onto everyone, but they didn't seem to feel anything. Everyone stared at this unexpected scene with their mouths agape. Even Rinpochian, who was squatting at the side with his hands covering his ears, was ignored. It was like the end of the world, and it was completely beyond everyone's understanding. Even the most powerful person would not be able to unleash such a powerful attack. Whether it was Tong Jinye, Tu Wan, Qin Xuan, the Zhang family, or Qin Yun's sword, who was leaning against the city wall and watching this scene, the students of the academy and Hongxian small group, they were all speechless when they saw this scene that was beyond everyone's imagination. Everyone was stunned. Even everyone in Lan City was alarmed by the news. After all, the explosion was too close. It was only 2,000 meters away from Lan City, and the strong tremors could even be felt on the other side of the city. Not to mention the deafening sound that sounded like the wrath of God. When the smoke gradually dissipated, the concrete cubes in the distance had disappeared. Even the gravel that Tu Hong had smashed just now was gone. All that was left was a huge pit that had a radius of more than 10 meters. There was not a single blade of grass within 100 meters of the pit, and even the trees that were 100 meters away had been broken. Outside the city, there was complete silence. Then there was the sound of people gasping. "Your Majesty, I'll go and take a look." Tong Jinye's eyes seemed to be emitting light. In a flash, he appeared in the distance, but he quickly ran back every few seconds with smoke coming out from his beard. "Hot, hot, it's too hot." Tong Jinye patted his beard as soon as he landed. Then he asked Feng Ho pitifully, "What happened to my beard? This old man seems to smell something burning. Shave it. It's hopeless." Feng Ho snapped out of his shock and looked at Tong Jinye. His beard had curled up. At this time, everyone came back to their senses. It was a mess outside the city, and everyone was discussing the scene just now in shock. Everyone knew that Rinpoche definitely had a trump card, but no one expected it to be such a big one that they were all shocked. After another 2 hours, the temperature at the center of the explosion slowly dropped, allowing everyone to get closer. Everyone gathered around and saw that there was a huge pit with a radius of 50 to 60 meters and a depth of more than 20 meters. This power wasn't just big, but it was simply terrifying. After marveling at this terrifying destructive power, everyone's faces gradually became strange. A huge concrete block was in the pit. It wasn't too big and was only a quarter of an intact block. However, the problem was that Tu Hong's block had been smashed into small pieces, and there wasn't even a trace of it left. It had been blown away by the shockwave just now. With such a big piece inside, it could only be Rinpoche's target. If both parties competed in making pits in the ground, Rinpoche would undoubtedly be the winner. There was no doubt about the power of the attack just now. Just the visual effect alone was shocking enough, and the power was even more astonishing. The problem was that both parties' targets were the two huge concrete cubes. In other words, Rinpoche used an extremely destructive attack that exceeded everyone's imagination and lost. Rinpoche was speechless when he saw that piece of concrete in the pit. He smiled awkwardly and said, "I missed. It seems that Sir Tu won this round." From the looks of it, the mortar shell just now stuck close to the concrete cube and then exploded. Since it exploded from below, most of the concrete was blown up and the rest was sent flying upward before falling into the pit. Hearing this, everyone was speechless. Su Peng and the others at the side were even more shocked. They were even more shocked than when they saw the explosion just now. "You made such a big scene and made such a big pit, and then you tell us that you missed? Huh? Are you trying to kill us? Huh? My pocket money." Tong Lan looked like she was on the verge of collapsing. If it weren't for someone holding her back, she would have rushed up and fought with Rinpoche. "Ha, that's what I said. Who cares about this and that? Let's bet big. All in. Whichever has the higher odds. The winner will book the brothel, and the loser will go hunting in the mountains." A ferocious-looking young man laughed wildly. "Dad, tonight at Jinyu Restaurant, it's my treat." Chapter 692. The match between Rinpoche and Tu Hong was finally over. When the results were out, some people were happy while others were sad. The student from the academy looked miserable. Almost all of them had lost and were gnashing their teeth in anger. They wanted to fight Rinpoche to the death. The ones who were happy were Hongxian and the others, or the people from the Protectorate of the North and the Protectorate of the South who were in charge of affairs in Lan City. They had made a small profit this time. Although this amount of money wasn't a lot for the two protectorates, it was still very useful. Most of the people returned with different thoughts in their minds. In any case, These matches allowed many people to see the effects of external objects. They weren't as unbearable as they had always thought. Especially in the last match, although Runbachian's shot was off target, it could be said that it was a glorious defeat. In terms of destructive power alone, it was shocking and much more important than Runbachian's previous reputation as a poison warrior. Even in a crowded situation, the number of people killed by this bomb was only a fraction of the number of people who were poisoned to death. Even experts like Tong Jinye and Qin Chuan couldn't create such a huge pit with a length and width of 50 to 60 meters and a depth of 20 meters, but Runbachian did it as an ordinary person. Under special circumstances or carelessness, even a Cardinal Heaven expert would be seriously injured or even killed by this attack. If there were 10 or 100 of such things, even a Cardinal Heaven expert would have to take a detour. The value of Black Bamboo Academy and Runbachian's strength had greatly increased in everyone's hearts. Even the students of Black Bamboo Academy were re-evaluated. After that explosion, Black Bamboo Academy truly became the #1 academy in Dayo. Of course, Dayo didn't have a second academy. It didn't even have a school. However, Black Bamboo Academy's status had greatly increased in everyone's hearts. As the principal, Runbachian's status had instantly risen to the level of a Cardinal Heaven expert. This time, not only did no one gossip, but many people began to wonder if they could also send their own disciples to the academy. In any case, besides practicing martial arts, they usually went around fighting. Going to the academy wouldn't affect their martial arts training and could even learn some things from Runbachian. Over the next few days, the news and results of the duel between Runbachian and Tu Hong began to spread throughout Lan City. After all, the explosion was too loud and could be said to have alarmed the entire city. It was impossible to hide it, even if one wanted to. For the next few days, there were people discussing it on the streets and alleys. Many people even specially went to the outskirts of the city to see the big pit. When they found out that it was created by Runbachian, they were all astonished. The commoner disciples of the academy became celebrities for a few days in a row. When they returned from school, they were surrounded by a group of people asking all sorts of questions. Some were curious about Runbachian, some were inquiring about what they learned from the academy, and some were inquiring about how to enter the academy. This allowed them to finally gain some comfort after experiencing the great loss of becoming rich and losing their family fortune. After all, if the academy became famous, they would also feel honored. More directly, the treatment they received in and out of the street every day was different. This was something everyone could feel. Runbachian placed the book on the lectern and swept his gaze across the classroom. Their bitter and hateful faces finally looked a little better today. After all, time could erase everything, including losing one's family fortune. In any case, he would treat it as a lesson to them. Uncontrollable things like gambling and jumping off cliffs should be kept away. That afternoon, the attention of the students was focused on another matter, which was how to send the train out of the city. These days, the construction of the railway tracks in the academy and the outskirts of the city didn't stop at all. Everything was finally completed, and the next step was to test the train. However, how to send the train out of the city was still a problem. One option was to push the train over since it had wheels. However, this idea was immediately opposed by a bunch of people. After all, trains were currently designed to travel on rails. Inside the wheels was a disc that was larger than the wheels, called the wheel rim. If the train was pushed all the way over, the wheel rim would be scrapped. Furthermore, due to the thickness of the wheel rim and the weight of the train, it was estimated that all the stone slabs along the way would be crushed. Therefore, the best method was to dismantle the train and send it over separately, or simply carry it over. As for using an ox cart to transport it, the problem was the same as pushing the train over. All the stone slabs along the way would be crushed. Furthermore, whether the wooden wheels could withstand the weight was another matter. Everyone thought that the train's weight of 6,000 to 7,000 kilograms wasn't a problem, so they simply carried it over. As for the candidate to carry it, Qing Lian was the first choice. She was from Great Xia and didn't get along with everyone. Even after school ended, no one knew where she went. Furthermore, she wasn't very strong. It's best to have an expert on board to share the burden of the others, someone said. Naturally, the experts in the academy were Shurgan and Tonglan. Tonglan sat on the train and swung her legs. When she heard what the others said, she immediately stuck out her flat chest and had a proud expression that said, "I won't carry it even if you come and beg me." However, everyone knew that this was her character. If she really had to do it, she wouldn't be careless. Forget about Tonglan. She's too short. She won't be able to reach it even if she raises her hands, Shurgan said with a smile. Tonglan, who was on the train, immediately stiffened. She was completely frozen. Too short, too short, too short. These three words struck Tonglan like lightning. She was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. "What did you say?" Tonglan glared at Shurgan fiercely. Shurgan raised his bent hands and said unhurriedly, "Can you reach this height?" Looking at the height of Shurgan's hands, Tonglan's face turned green. This was because she really couldn't reach it. Her height only reached Shurgan's chest. When she raised her hands, she was only slightly taller than Shurgan's head. "All right, let's arrange the rest of the people now." Shurgan laughed. Tonglan gritted her small canine teeth and had the intention to kill someone. In the end, apart from Qing Lian and Tonglan, everyone else was divided into 3 batches. Each batch consisted of 10 people and had to take turns every once in a while. Seeing that everyone had broken the courtyard wall and carried the train out, Tonglan frantically shouted 3 times in the courtyard. "Ah, ah, ah. Is it my fault that I'm short? Ah, is it my fault that I'm short?" After everyone sent the train out of the east gate, they began to rejoice that their decision to carry the train was indeed correct. It was nearing the rainy season, and it rained every 2 or 3 days. Even the official roads outside the city would sink into the mud, not to mention that the position of the railway was slightly off. Thus, the journey was filled with mud and water. It took half a day to carry the train to its position. There were railway tracks inside and wooden fences surrounding it. There were also many soldiers guarding it. Otherwise, with so many railway tracks, it would have long been carried away. For the next few days, everyone modified the train and checked the condition of the railway tracks. They also added a shed to the back of the train to block the rain and a carriage to load coal. Chapter 693. Clang, 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 clang. The noise was accompanied by the vibration under his body, making him feel like he was going to fall apart at any time. In an open space surrounded by fences outside Lawn City, there was a circle of rails with a diameter of 400 meters. A train pulling 2 wooden carriages was running along the rails, making clanging sounds continuously. Run Baqian, the Empress, and the rest were in the second carriage behind the train. The wind blew against their faces as the smoke from the locomotive drifted. "It's much faster than an ox cart," Juyen, the Minister of Justice, said as he felt the wind. "It's also much steadier," everyone said. With the roads in this world, coupled with the wooden tires and shock absorbers, even riding in the city required extremely strong buttocks, let alone outside the city. After leaving Lawn City, it would be a disaster if the ox cart sped up a little. It could even make one vomit out their internal organs. "It's just that the smell is too unpleasant," Yu Shang, the Minister of Agriculture, said as she covered her nose. "After all, there are advantages and disadvantages." Ren Baqian smiled and then introduced it to everyone. This kind of train can travel 70 kilometers in an hour and 140 kilometers in 2 hours. It can travel up to 1,680 kilometers in a day and only takes 2 days to travel from Lawn City to the Protectorate of the Northeast or the Protectorate of the North. This is only the current speed. It can continue to increase in the future and even double. So fast. Doesn't this thing need to rest? Someone immediately asked in surprise. This isn't a living thing, so it doesn't need to rest like livestock. As long as there's enough coal, it can maintain this speed, Ren Baqian explained to everyone. Also, this kind of train can carry a lot of cargo. It's made of metal, and the load of one carriage is equivalent to about 60 ox carts. It can pull dozens of carriages, which is equivalent to the load of more than 4,000 ox carts. It doesn't require that many people and doesn't consume that much rations. Not only can this kind of train carry a lot of cargo, but it can also be used to transport troops. It only takes 2 days to send tens of thousands of troops to the Protectorate of the Northeast and the Protectorate of the North, which also saves a lot of time and rations. This is especially true when there's a war. Whether it's speed or load, it's completely incomparable to an animal cart. More importantly, with this thing, it will be much easier to rule the Yun Nation. No matter what happens there, they can respond and deploy troops in a timely manner. All kinds of resources from the Yun Nation can also be transported back in large quantities. Everyone sucked in a cold breath. The crowd might not be very clear about the concepts of load and speed, but when it came to the load of more than 4,000 ox carts in the time of 2 days, everyone immediately had a relatively clear idea. One had to know that a carriage of 4 corn cows weighed no more than 500 kilograms, and their speed was even slower. They could only travel a little more than 100 kilometers a day. In other words, a train running for 1 day was equivalent to 4,000 ox carts traveling for 10 days. The amount of manpower, material resources, and rations needed for this was an astronomical figure. Even the Aboriginals understood the value of time. With such a contrast, everyone present was shaken and beaming with joy. It was as if they could drive a train straight to the Yun Nation the next day. Principal Ren's words are very moving, and I'm also very moved. However, all of you should know that just these so-called rails below have consumed more than 200,000 kilograms of steel, which is enough to arm 10,000 soldiers. It was thousands of miles from the Yun Nation. How much iron was needed? More than 50 million kilograms. Even if Mount Damo was emptied, there might not be so much iron, and the time needed would be in the hundreds of years. Tuan poured a bucket of cold water on everyone from head to toe. Everyone didn't need to count with their fingers. Just hearing that more than 100,000 kilograms of iron was enough to scare them. What was even more frightening was the amount of iron needed to spread from here to the Yun Nation. This number had completely exceeded everyone's understanding of numbers. They always felt that this number was inexplicably far away, so far that it seemed impossible to achieve. Everyone was dumbfounded as they looked at Tu Wan and Run Bachien, not knowing what to say. Doesn't that mean that it can't be built at all? Someone sighed. No. My plan is to connect Lan City to the Yun Nation in 10 years, not to the Protectorate of the Northeast. Rin Bachien waved his hand. Everyone, please listen to me. In fact, it's not as difficult as you think. Although iron ore is scarce in Dayo, there is no shortage in the Yun Nation. As far as I know, there are 7 known iron ore mountains in the Yun Nation, and I'm afraid there are more that have yet to be discovered. This railway is calculated to be 4,000 kilometers long, and according to the standard of 100 kilograms of iron per meter of rail, it will require 400 million kilograms of iron. Even the smallest iron ore mine will contain at least 100,000 kilograms of iron ore. Based on 50% of the iron ore content, there will be 250 million kilograms of iron and steel, which is enough to build such a railway. A slightly larger iron ore mine can build 10 such railways, and a medium-sized iron ore mine can build 100 such railways. Therefore, you don't need to worry about the amount of iron and steel consumed. The Yun Nation has enough iron and steel reserves. As for mining, that's even less of a problem. As long as a prisoner of war can mine 5 kilograms of iron a day, it will be more than 1,500 kilograms a year. The iron ore mines in the Yun Nation aren't like those on Mount Damo. Do you think that each of them can't even mine 5 kilograms of iron a day? 100,000 prisoners of war will be able to mine enough iron in 2 years. Rin Bachien put aside everything else and used numbers to calculate for everyone. As for mining iron ore, it wasn't a problem in his eyes. The physical fitness of the people in this world was much stronger than that of the people on Earth. If they encountered any problems, there were so many Earth wheel experts who could solve them. If it didn't work out, they could still transport explosives over. Compared to the mining methods on Earth, there were many more ways to mine, and the difficulty was much lower. Furthermore, we can directly build a steel plant in the Protectorate of the Northeast. After smelting in the Protectorate of the Northeast, we can directly build a railway from there to the nation. Even if we fail in the end, the railway can be used for other purposes. It will only consume a little manpower and rations, and we will still be able to obtain a lot of iron and steel. If we succeed, this will be a great achievement for generations to come, and the Yun nation will be firmly in the hands of the empire. After Rinpoche finished speaking, everyone began to ponder deeply. Qin Chuan scratched his head and said, "Although I don't understand how much is needed, what Sir Rin said makes sense. Sir Rin is definitely more knowledgeable than I am, so I think it will work. If this railway could really be realized, the Ministry of War would also benefit from it." The thought of being able to mobilize troops made Qin Chuan excited. "I think that what Sir Rin said is right. If this matter succeeds, the entire Yun nation will be in the hands of Her Majesty. It will be worth it even if we have to pay a little," Shi Qing said slowly. "I second that." Ko Zhihai nodded. "I am aware of Sir Ren's knowledge and ability." Tong Xingye chuckled and then changed the topic. "However, is there really that much iron in the Yun nation?" "Definitely, indefinitely. Iron is one of the most common substances in nature. As long as iron ore is formed, the amount won't be too little. Furthermore, I have been following the most conservative estimates. Based on the level of prospecting in the Yun nation, most of the iron ores that could be discovered are exposed open-pit mines. The reserves and their quality may be higher than what I have said. In particular, 3 of the iron ores are very close to each other, and it is very likely that a large iron ore is buried underground. The location of these 3 iron ores is currently where the vanguard of Protector General Zi Donglai's troops is. As long as we continue to push forward, these 3 iron ores will fall into our hands, Rinpoche said. Even Tu Hong didn't say anything else after hearing this. After all, if such a railway could achieve the effect that Rinpoche had mentioned, it would be too valuable and worth the risk. Moreover, I didn't need to pay much. Whether it was the mines or the captives, they were all from the Yun nation. The most important problem of food could be solved by the pumpkins, sweet potatoes, and other high-yielding crops that Rinpoche had brought. What they had to do was to conquer the Yun nation, which was originally part of the plan. Everyone had been drooling over the riches of the Yun nation for a long time. Even if they didn't have this goal, they wouldn't let go of this piece of fat meat, not to mention that it was already on the chopping board. At present, Deo had successively sent 60,000 reinforcements to the Protectorate of the Northeast. In addition to the original army of the Protectorate of the Northeast, there were a total of 75,000 soldiers, which was close to the original strength of Deo. All of them had been sent to the Yun nation. The Yun nation had now lost a quarter of its land, and the country was in a state of panic. Everyone jumped off the train and watched from the side. After 12 hours without slowing down, just as Rinpoche had said, they were satisfied and returned to the city to arrange the following matters. The plundering of the iron ores and the laying of the railway had become one of the most important things in everyone's mind. The Black Bamboo Academy also had to continue to improve the design of the train to ensure that there wouldn't be any problems. If the speed could be doubled, as Rinpoche had said, everyone would wake up laughing even in their dreams. Chapter 694. Zheng Chengmian has great ambitions but little talent. Now that a quarter of the Yun nation's land has been seized by the barbarians, he is still rebuking dissidents in the imperial court, hindering the Western army, and cutting off their reinforcements. Nearly 100 people are still under the iron hooves of the barbarians. He is simply incompetent. This time, the barbarians are menacing and completely different from the past. The 500,000 troops of Great Xia have already deployed at the southern front and are fighting with the barbarian General Hongwu. However, the 70,000 barbarian soldiers in the Yun nation have no intention of retreating. Can't they see their purpose? The barbarians want to destroy the Yun nation this time. However, Zheng Qingyan is still wishful thinking that they will retreat on their own. If the Yun nation is destroyed, you and I will both be doomed. Tomorrow, My teacher will depart for Wang Jing and fight with his life. My teacher has already contacted more than 10 officials who have returned to their hometown to go to the capital together. Even if he has to knock his head against a drum, he must let His Majesty know how rotten the situation is. If Zheng Chengmian is allowed to do as he pleases, the destruction of the nation is imminent. Although I'm just a scholar, I'm willing to follow teacher. What do you think? In the tavern, a scholar sat at a table and spoke passionately. His young face was slightly flushed due to his hot blood. I'm not talented, but I'm also willing to follow teacher Zhengshan. A scholar opposite him immediately cupped his hands. Let's go together. I'd rather die than wait here to be trampled by the barbarians. The others said passionately. The scholarly spirit was vividly written on the few of them. Good. A burly man at the table next to them slammed the table and cheered. Everyone, although I can't go, I admire all of you. This pot of wine is a toast to all of you. As soon as he said this, many people around him followed suit, which immediately made the scholars excited. As long as the Yun Nation still has hot-blooded men like you, the Yun Nation will win. After finishing the wine, the burly man asked a few more details, such as whether the guards were safe and who else teacher Zhengshan, who was famous in Jiang City, had invited. He then praised them profusely. After a while, he went downstairs and circled around the city twice before entering a remote courtyard. He recounted everything that happened in the restaurant in full detail. Sir, what do you think? In front of him was a middle-aged man in his 40s. He had a broad forehead and looked like a typical member of the Jing tribe. However, he didn't look much different from the people of the Yun Nation. No one would be able to recognize him if he wore a bamboo hat. Although the higher-ups didn't say it, judging from the current situation, I'm afraid that the Yun Nation is really going to be destroyed. There's an earth wheel expert among their guards. It seems like I have to deal with them personally. Tomorrow, keep an eye on their departure time and route, then kill them. Don't let them go to Wang capital. After the burly man left, the middle-aged man wrote another letter and sent it out on horseback. The next day, a group of carriages, horses, and a dozen or so scholars left Dongshin. However, at noon the next day, someone found their corpses 100 miles away. When the news came back, everyone in Rivertown was shocked. Zheng Chengmian actually had so many eyes and ears. They had just set off and were intercepted by his men. Well done. Ren Baqian was quite happy to receive the news from the northeast. He then returned to the palace and handed the paper to the Empress, who was reading comics. Those people did a good job. Although they acted on their own, I still want to praise them. The value of incorporating these people has already been realized. With such a group of people, many things have become much easier. If they awaken the Yun Nation, it will be a little troublesome. We have only occupied a quarter of the territory. If the Yun Nation mobilizes the whole nation, our casualties will be much higher. Although this will happen sooner or later, with more and more cities falling, it will be too late by the time they react. You can't kill someone with 2 fingers. The Empress stretched out 2 fingers and gestured in front of her. I think they can. Rinpochian spread out his hands and laughed. Well, your Majesty is right. However, the strength of 2 fingers isn't as strong as a fist. The Empress retracted her fingers and said faintly, I understand what you mean. These people have done a good job. I'm clear about rewards and punishments, and I will give them the rewards they deserve. With your Majesty's words, they won't be risking their lives and working hard in the Yun Nation. Rinpochian picked up a fruit from beside the Empress's couch and put it in his mouth. It was already June, and it was the rainy season. The occasional rainstorm didn't reduce the heat in Lawn City, but made it even more stuffy. After the train was shown to the court, everything was going on in an orderly manner. The students at the academy were listening to the class while improving the train. Rinpochian had completely handed over these tasks to them. Even though their progress was slow, their gains were still huge. In addition, the other thing they needed to do was to develop a thermal generator under Rinpochian's guidance from time to time. In fact, the principle of a thermal generator wasn't complicated, and it was easy to achieve initial results. The more important thing was to improve the conversion efficiency and the degree of stability. With the example of the train, Many students were quite happy and plunged into the research of the generator. This research, in turn, prompted them to take the initiative to learn. They flipped through the books in the library, and every little bit of progress made them extremely excited. At present, the students at the academy and the outside world had become two completely different circles. They had become an isolated tower. The things that the students at the academy played with were completely unknown to the people outside. They were no longer interested in the things that the people outside played with. In front of them was a brand new world full of unknowns, and every once in a while, they would discover something new in this world. The more they knew, the more problems they would encounter, and the more problems they would solve. These new problems and gains would make them even more excited to continue climbing the mountain. The sense of accomplishment and excitement, as well as the sense of identity that came from working together, was something that nothing else could give them. Even Tonglan had become one with the other students, even though she still had that arrogant look on her face. However, there were also exceptions in the academy. For example, Qing Lian was obsessed with mathematics and couldn't extricate herself from it. Every day, she would hold books on algebra and geometry without letting go of them for even a moment. Faced with all kinds of questions from Qing Lian every day, Ren Baqian was forced to pick up the mathematics that he had returned to the teacher long ago. On the other hand, with the maturity of the high-yield crops brought by Ren Baqian, the harvest of thousands of kilograms per mu had already made Lan City and the surrounding cities rich in food. New crops such as pumpkins and potatoes began to appear in the market in large quantities and were accepted by the people. These high-yield crops and canned fish, which had been increasing in production, had greatly relieved the pressure brought about by Dayo's repeated conscription over the past year. The Empress also took this opportunity to mobilize more auxiliary troops from more cities to the Yun nation. On the one hand, they had to transport the plundered goods, and on the other hand, they had to manage the prisoners of war and dig the 3 iron mines that they had just obtained. Now that Zedonglai was plundering money, food, and resources from the Yun nation, a large number of prisoners couldn't be sent back to Dayo in time and could only be guarded or killed on the spot. As for the war with the Qin nation in Great Xia, due to the arrival of the rainy season, the bowstrings and crossbows began to lose their elasticity due to the moisture, and the attacks from both directions slowed down for a while. In other words, the originally loud thunder but little rain gradually began to develop into a situation where they were just bystanders. For this reason, Ren Baqian had no choice but to give Su Qing another batch of stink bombs to remind everyone in Great Xia. For Ren Baqian, the most important thing was that he was getting closer to breaking through the last visualization of Rui visualization, the visualization of metal. Chapter 695. There were no plants, and the ground was dry and cracked. Swords of different shapes were stuck in the ground. Every few steps, there would be a quaint sword half buried in the ground. The background of the sky was a fiery red sunset. The fiery red sky, the surrounding desolation, and the ownerless swords gave Ren Baqian a sense of desolation. The land of sharp metal was the name of this place. Ren Baqian walked forward slowly. Although he didn't come into contact with anything, there were bloody wounds on his body from time to time. It was as if there were countless invisible swords trying to cut him into pieces. This was the world of the visualization of metal. Everywhere was filled with invisible, sharp metal chi. Ren Baqian felt that it should be called the infinite sword creation or the sword tomb. Amitba. Ren Baqian placed one hand on his chest and chanted the name of Buddha. He emptied his mind and seemed to be able to reduce the pain on his body by doing so. The pain of being cut by sharp blades was everywhere. Ren Baqian suddenly felt a chill in his crotch. The calmness in his heart was suddenly broken, and his whole face was distorted. Damn it! He pulled open his pants in fear and looked down. Fortunately, the string of treasures was still there. It was just that there were 2 small wounds on his body. After the chill, he began to feel a burning pain. Although the other visualizations also caused him to die from drowning in the visualization of water, being blown down by the wind, and falling to his death from the visualization of earth, being burned to death from the visualization of fire, being roasted to death from the visualization of metal, and being burned to death from the visualization of metal. The sharp metal chi was everywhere and undetectable. Some stayed in place and waited for him to bump into it. Some were activated when he passed by the swords, and he didn't know where the next cut would come from. Rinpoche often felt a chill in his crotch, which made him feel cold from head to toe. He could tolerate other things, but not this. Every time he entered the visualization of metal, the positions of the swords and the positions of the sharp metal chi were different. Rinpoche couldn't figure out the pattern and could only try his luck as he walked forward. Moreover, the process of dying in the land of sharp metal was extremely long. Almost every time, they would walk for an unknown amount of time before they ran out of blood and returned to the real world. After fastening his pants, he walked forward for a long time. Not a single part of his body was intact, and half of his left palm was missing. Rinpoche staggered forward. The loss of blood had made his strength weaker and weaker, and his vision had started to blur. Rinpoche placed his hand on the hilt of the sword beside him. The tan leather was very delicate to the touch. However, a ray of sword chi shot out from the hilt and pierced his right hand. However, he didn't seem to notice anything. He just stared at an empty space 100 meters in front of him. The empty space was surrounded by densely packed ancient swords, and there was only one sword in the middle of the empty space. It was like the Emperor of Swords, standing alone and accepting the worship of the other subjects. Rinpoche knew that as long as he pulled out the sword, he would be able to pass the visualization of metal. He struggled to move his feet and walked for another 10 meters. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his foot, and half of his foot was missing. Rinpoche couldn't stand still and fell to the ground. He crawled for another 10 meters before his vision turned black. When he opened his eyes again, he was back in the room in Pingle Park. Rinpoche didn't say anything else. He first took off his pants to take a look and checked again. After confirming that there was no problem with the function, he was relieved. He was always worried that he would come out of the visualization of metal one day and realize that he was impotent. For example, he had heard a lot of experiments like binding a person blindfolded, making a cut on the wrist, and then using a water pipe to drip water, just like letting out blood. In the end, the person died. Fortunately, Rinpoche's worries didn't come true. However, Rinpoche knew that after practicing the Rui visualization, his tolerance for pain was extremely high. For example, something like a bone fracture. If it was in the past, he would have been in so much pain that he wished he was dead. However, as his cultivation progressed, he didn't seem to take it seriously. Even if he was accidentally pushed by the Empress and suffered a bone fracture, he just looked miserable and didn't feel much emotional. In addition, his reverence for death was getting lower and lower. The world of the Rui visualization began to affect his perception of death. Although he clearly knew that death in the real world wasn't like the Rui visualization, it was also another beginning. However, everything in the Rui visualization was too real. That kind of feeling of death was too real. Regardless of whether it was drowning, falling, burning, or bleeding to death, after experiencing death countless times, it was very difficult for him not to be affected. The result was that he had died too many times in the Rui visualization. No matter how miserable the way of dying was, he had tried it countless times. He began to lose his reverence for death, whether it was himself or other people. He didn't know whether these changes were good or bad. Although the practice of the Rui visualization wasn't as arduous as other martial arts techniques, with the help of a large number of medicinal herbs, the speed of cultivation could be said to be much faster than those geniuses with exceptional talent. In just 1.5 years, he went from an ordinary person to the threshold of the earth wheel level. However, there was such a huge problem that he didn't know if it was a hidden danger or not. Perhaps he would only understand what kind of impact it had on his future when he looked back on it a long time later. After waking up, Rinpoche went out and kicked Tian Tian and Gun Gun, who pounced on him with their mouths full of fangs. He also kicked Ting Ting, who was dizzy and disoriented. Then, he started his daily routine as if nothing had happened. The death in the visualization of metal and the realization at that time could be recovered as long as he slept and didn't have any impact on himself. After all, after such a long time of practice, he already knew how to adjust himself. He had to admit that many things from those baldies were quite useful. Although Rinpoche only thought of the phrase Amitabha Buddha when he killed people or when he was killed in the Rui visualization, Rinpoche pondered for a while. He seemed to have the title of Bodhisattva and didn't know how that little monk was doing. At noon that day, Rinpoche received a letter from the little monk asking for help. This made Rinpoche feel that he had the gift of foresight or the gift of a crow's beak. Bodhisattva, there's nothing to eat. Xing Ruo is about to starve to death. However, the teachings of Buddhism have not been passed down, and the benefactress has not understood the wonders of conversion. Xing Ruo still has to be saved. Bodhisattva, please send some food. Note, food for 1,000 people. Looking at this message that came out of nowhere from Tianjin Basin, Rinpoche scratched his head. Back then, didn't his master ask him to snatch a man from the benefactress? How did it become about converting the benefactress? What exactly happened to this little monk Xing Ruo? After a series of inquiries, Rinpoche didn't know whether to laugh or cry. During this period of time, the little monk had been doing quite well in preaching in Tianjin Basin. Over the past year, he had gained a few thousand followers. From a few dozen followers to a few thousand followers, this was already considered very impressive for a little monk who wasn't even 10 years old. Of course, this was also related to the massacre in Tianjin Basin by Shiwanya and the chaos in Jianbei City. After that little monk had gained some followers and advocated for the people to help each other, which helped them get through the most difficult period. Although the current situation wasn't very good, it was much better than the situation in Jianbei City. After that, he actually went to convert prostitutes. It should be said that those prostitutes were women who lost their families due to the war and couldn't make a living. They were reduced to the streets in exchange for food. They were also a group of pitiful people. Chapter 696. In the following days, Rinpoche kept trying. The most recent time, he bled to death at the edge of the Boundless Sword Formation. The furthest he went was about 200 meters away from the Boundless Sword Formation before his throat was pierced by a sword that suddenly appeared. However, Rinpoche knew that he was very close to breaking through. No matter how the sharp metal energy in the sword formation changed, he was still advancing. A distance of 100 meters. If he was lucky, he would be able to break through the next time. If he was unlucky, he might need to try 10 or 20 times. After another half a month, he was missing 4 fingers on one hand, and his other hand was broken at the elbow. He was missing an ear, and he was blind in one eye. There was almost no part of his body that was intact. He looked as miserable as he could be. However, this couldn't stop the fire in his heart. He had finally walked out of the sword formation. After more than 7 months, he had died more than 200 times. There wasn't a single part of his body that wasn't injured. However, he had finally walked out. Rinpoche roared at the sky and used all his strength to stride forward. However, before he had even walked half the distance, he felt a sharp pain coming from his knee. He lost his balance and fell forward. At that moment, his injured calf was chopped off by the sharp metal energy that was floating in the air. Bang! Rinpoche fell heavily on the ground. His heart trembled. The feeling of falling again and again, bleeding to death, surfaced in his heart. He secretly clenched his teeth. Could it be that he was going to fail again? However, even if he failed, he couldn't just wait for death here. Even if he was a little closer to that sword, the chances of success would be higher next time. Rinpoche clenched his teeth and crawled forward with his hands and feet. The wounds on his body were covered with sand, and at the same time, a long trail of blood was left on the ground. The strength in his body was getting weaker and weaker, and his body was getting colder and colder. However, the distance between him and that sword was getting closer and closer. If others could see this scene in his consciousness, they would be able to feel the tenacity exuding from Rinpoche's body. If it was someone else who kept dying over and over again like this, those who were weak would have given up long ago. Even if an ordinary person didn't break down, their personality would change drastically. However, Rinpoche persevered time and time again and never relaxed. Normally, he would even laugh and cry. Even Rin Baqian himself didn't expect his mental fortitude to be this strong. However, in Dayo's 1.5 years, he had honed his skills to such an extent. Even with his broken elbows and exposed knees, he still crawled forward bit by bit, even though every movement would cause him severe pain. He had forgotten the passage of time. Even though his body was extremely weak, he did not die. With his last breath, he crawled to the sword. A sword with a red hilt made of an unknown material. Unlike the other ownerless swords that were broken, this sword's entire body was bright as snow, as if it was meticulously cleaned by its owner every day. Moreover, there were no patterns on it. There was only an inclined surface in the middle of the blade. It seemed that the middle of the blade was much thicker than the two sides of the blade. Ha 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 ha. Rinpoche lay on the ground and laughed. The sword was right in front of his fingertips, and his fingertips could almost feel the coldness of the blade. He could finally touch it. Stand up, stand up. Rinpoche mumbled softly after he had laughed enough. He used the hand that was missing 3 fingers to support his body and slowly lifted his upper body. He then realized that he was completely unable to stand up due to his missing left arm and leg. Rinpoche gritted his teeth and used his broken arm to support himself on the ground. The pain of his flesh rubbing against the sand and gravel on the ground, as well as the pain from all over his body, almost made him groan in pain. The simple action of getting up took him a full minute. Blood and sweat continuously spilled on the ground below him. If he moved a little slower, the pain might be less, but it would take too long. Rinpoche didn't know how long his current body could hold on. He struggled to kneel on the ground and pressed his broken knee to the ground. Rinpoche was finally able to reach for the hilt of the sword. He could touch it with his hand, and it felt moist just like skin. Whether it was the texture or the texture, it made Rinpoche feel that the sword hilt was wrapped in blood-stained human skin. Rinpoche let out a long breath that reeked of blood. All that was left was to pull the sword out. Rinpoche tried hard to lift his arm, but the sword didn't budge an inch. He tried 3 times in a row and used up most of his remaining strength, but the sword still didn't budge an inch. I don't have enough strength. I have to stand up, Rinpoche muttered to himself while gasping for air. The blood loss and pain made it very difficult for him to breathe. Rinpoche used 2 fingers in his palm to firmly hold the sword hilt. He shifted his center of gravity forward and used his hand to support his body to stand up. To his surprise, the sword was actually pressed down by the strength of his body. It was as if it had pierced through something below and made a soft sound. He. Rinpoche laughed inexplicably. He always thought that he had to pull the sword out. Ever since he saw the sword, he had this feeling. In the end, he actually had to press it down. If he had arrived here in one piece, he didn't know how much effort he would have had to put in to realize this. He was really lucky. As Rinpoche thought about it, he couldn't support his body anymore and fell to the ground. His consciousness became more and more blurry, and he could return to reality at any time. Rumble. The sky was shaking, the earth was shaking, and everything in this world was shaking and collapsing. The sky was full of cracks, and the earth was peeling off piece by piece. This world seemed to be floating in the air. Now that the layers supporting the world had been pierced, the world began to collapse and peel off. When this world peeled off to the end, it scattered like fragments, leaving only a boundless void. All of Rinpoche's senses were deprived. His sight, hearing, smell, touch, strength, pain, and even the feeling of the passage of time. Except for his slow thinking, everything else was gone. He floated in the darkness just like that. In the outside world, Rinpoche's body was also undergoing changes. The lungs corresponding to gold began to undergo an inexplicable change the moment he broke through. The impurities in his lungs were removed, and Rinpoche, who had lost consciousness, spat out mouthfuls of black mucus. These were the impurities that had been stuck in his lungs for so many years. They were stripped off and expelled from his body during this change. Chapter 697. Rinpoche was awakened by hunger. The strong sense of hunger was like a tide that stimulated his brain. His surroundings were dark, but he was lying on a familiar bed. The sound of heavy rain could be heard from outside the window. However, Rinpoche had no time to think about other things. Hungry, 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 hungry. Rinpoche felt that his eyes had turned green. He quickly found a bag filled with candies from around the bed. He tore open the wrapper with trembling hands and threw the candies into the bag. Finally, he swallowed them without any hesitation. 1 piece, 2 pieces, 3 pieces. A bag of about 5 kilograms of candies was in his stomach. The burning sensation in his stomach didn't diminish at all, and his brain was still sending out signals that he needed to eat. Rinpoche flipped over and landed on the ground like a ghost. He staggered, stabilized his body with great difficulty, and hurriedly pushed open the door and ran out. His gaze landed on Tion and Gun, who were hiding from the rain under the eaves. He felt as if he had seen delicious food. A large amount of saliva was secreted from his mouth before he swallowed it. Fortunately, although the 5 kilograms of candies didn't alleviate his hunger, it allowed him to retain his ability to think. Otherwise, if he had rushed out as soon as he woke up, he reckoned that he would only see a floor of bones when he woke up the next day. Rinpoche's figure floated into the rain, leaped over the wall, and headed straight for the imperial kitchen. Ever since he woke up, he had felt that his body was as light as a feather. Originally, he could only jump about 10 meters, but now he could easily jump 20 to 30 meters, which almost made him crash into a tree. However, he only pressed on the tree with one hand to slow himself down. He flipped his body up, landed on a branch, and dashed forward again. "Who's there?" A shout came from the darkness. Although Rinpoche couldn't see, he could sense that there were 2 very distinct auras in the darkness ahead. In the past, it was extremely difficult for Rinpoche to detect them. Now, he could easily sense that there were 2 people there and could even sense their approximate strength. "Is this an earth wheel expert?" Rinpoche thought to himself. He then said in a deep voice, "It's me, the principal of the Black Bamboo Academy." As soon as he spoke, he was slightly stunned. This voice didn't seem to belong to him. It was deeper than his own voice, and it sounded a little hoarse and torn. "Sir Rin?" someone asked in the darkness. "It's me." Rinpoche jumped down from the tree, and gradually he saw the 2 guards in the dark. "Who are you?" Their expressions changed when they saw Rinpoche. The steel sabers in their hands slashed at him gracefully. "Rinpoche, can't you 2 recognize me?" Rinpoche retreated as he endured the hunger that never stopped. With a light leap, he landed on the wall behind him. However, the steel sabers of the 2 men followed him like a shadow, even splitting the rain in the air. "What kind of demon is this? How dare you impersonate Sir Rin?" Rinpoche leaped, and with a bang, the entire wall was split apart by the 2 of them. If he had encountered such a situation in the past, he would probably have had to teleport back to Earth in an instant. However, even though the 2 of them were fast, he was able to grasp their movements in the dark and evade them. "I'm Rinpoche. Can't you recognize me?" Rinpoche frowned again. How could the Imperial Guards not recognize him? Even if you want to impersonate, you have to be more realistic. "Look at you. Which part of you looks like Sir Rin?" Furthermore, if it was Sir Rin, he would have been killed by that slash just now. The duo shouted as they chased after him. Rinpoche was speechless. Following their shouts, people in other parts of the palace responded with long roars. As if a hornet's nest had been poked, figures appeared on the roofs and walls and quickly surrounded Rinpoche. Without saying a word, rays of sabers surged toward Rinpoche and joined in the strangulation. "Damn you!" Rinpoche was about to die from anger. He was already starving to death, but he still had to be entangled by them. He had just broken through to the earthwheel level, yet he was already strangled by these guards. It was simply a joke. However, facing the rays of sabers around him, Rinpoche felt a great sense of danger and had goosebumps all over his body. He clearly felt that there was an opening around him, but his body couldn't keep up with his brain at all. He could only watch helplessly as the sabers and the rain sealed off all directions around him. It was as if he would be split in half in the next second. Metal chain, Rinpoche shouted in his heart. If he didn't block them now, the Empress would be able to collect his corpse in a while. Furthermore, the metal chain often appeared. Even if those people couldn't recognize him, there would always be someone who could, right? As Rinpoche shouted in his heart, a chain popped out from the top of his head. When it realized that it was surrounded by steel knives, it was startled and straightened its body, just like how an animal would straighten its tail when it was frightened. Boom! A bolt of lightning struck down, and the metal chain suddenly became a lightning rod. Rinpoche, who was leaping in the air with the chain on his head, was struck solidly. F***CK, your grandpa's. Rinpoche fell from the sky with smoke coming out of his mouth. He didn't expect that he would have such an unlucky day. After painstakingly attaining the earth wheel level, he woke up to be chased by guards and then struck by lightning. Rinpoche didn't know who to scold. He now understood the kind of bitter expert who thought that he was the best in the world after years of hard work, only to be smashed to death by a flying shoe as soon as he came out of seclusion. They were all people who had fallen from grace. Struck to death by lightning? It smells like it's cooked. The many guards who rushed over stopped their sabers and looked at each other. How unlucky was this person to be struck to death by lightning before they could do anything? However, this person was really courting death by sneaking into the palace. Someone has invaded. Inform the commander to come. Also, he pretended to be Sir Rin just now and went to check on him. The two guards immediately said as they recalled an important matter. This person isn't dead yet. Someone said after checking Rinpoche's breath. Watch him and wait for the commander to come. Xin rushed over in a moment. Rain was dripping down her armor, and her face was cold. Someone sneaked into the palace? How many people? Only one was found. However, this person pretended to be Sir Rin. I'm afraid that he's in danger, so I've already sent someone to investigate. Pass down the order to search the entire palace to see if he has any accomplices. Commander, Sir Rin is missing. Someone suddenly reported. What? Xin was shocked. If Rinpoche was missing, it would be a big problem. The door to Sir Rin's room was open, but it seems that no one went in. There are no traces of water on the ground. With such heavy rain, it's impossible to sneak into Sir Rin's room without leaving any traces. It looks like Sir Rin left on his own. I followed the traces left by Sir Rin after he left the room. The rain was too heavy, so there were very few traces left. However, according to the direction, it should be here. As soon as he said that, everyone was instantly confused. But this person's voice, figure, and appearance aren't Sir Rin's. The two guards who were the first to arrive were dumbfounded. Everyone carefully sized up the person on the ground. The lightning strike, just now, had left only a few rags hanging on his body. His whole body was charred black and emitted the aroma of roasted meat. A metal chain mysteriously protruded from the top of Rinpoche's head. Xinja looked at this metal chain, and the coldness on her face instantly dissipated. Such a wretched metal chain, there was no one else. Chapter 698. Damn it, damn it, damn it. In the boundless darkness, all that was left in Rinpoche's mind was his resentment towards the group of simple-minded guards and that brilliant bolt of lightning. During this period, he would occasionally curse the metal chain and then continue to curse the group of guards and that bolt of lightning. He had just broken through to the earth wheel level and was struck by lightning before he could even have a bite of meat. Was there anyone more miserable than him? After cursing in the darkness for an unknown period of time, Rinpoche suddenly felt that the surrounding darkness was a little different. It was a very subtle difference. There seemed to be a trace of purple pulsating in the darkness. It was just that the trace of purple was too small and hidden in the darkness, so he didn't notice it. What is this? The new discovery in the endless darkness made Rinpoche suddenly raise his spirits and search for that trace of purple. For an unknown period of time, Rinpoche had been trying hard to find traces of that trace of purple. However, he only found it twice, and both times were fleeting. This made him even more curious. However, at this moment, he felt himself being pulled by something. following which he felt dizzy. The feeling of hunger and pain all over his body surged into his mind again. Am I back? This thought emerged in Runbachian's mind. The eyeballs under his eyelids moved, and he tried hard to open his eyes. He saw the Empress's cold and concerned face above him. When he turned his gaze again, he realized that he seemed to be in the Empress's bedroom. You are finally awake. The Empress heaved a sigh of relief, following which she said softly, You are lucky. If it were someone else, they would have been in danger this time. It was dangerous enough for me, Rinbachian thought to himself. He was very conscious and could even feel the presence of 3 people in the hall. 2 of them were very weak, Qing Yuan and Hong Wan. The last one was at the Earthwheel level, but he didn't know who it was. Your Majesty, Sir Run should be fine. It's just that he has consumed too much energy and needs to replenish his body, an old voice said from the side. Understand, the Empress replied, following which the sound of that person's footsteps could be heard. Water meat. Rinbachian's lips trembled. He was about to go crazy from hunger. Drink this first. The Empress got Hong Wan to help him up and got Qing Yuan to feed him a bowl of black juice. Just as it entered his stomach through his esophagus, it turned into a warm current that spread throughout his body. What followed after was an even crazier and crazier sense of hunger. Meat, meat. Rinbachian felt so hungry that he could eat an entire 4-corn cow. Although he used to think this way when he was hungry, he usually only managed to eat a tail. But this time, he really felt that he could eat a cow. Inform the Imperial Kitchen, the Empress instructed, following which she stuffed a fruit into Rinbachian's hand and said, Eat it first. Rinbachian raised his hand and finished the fruit in 2 or 3 bites. When he was about to reach for another one, he suddenly froze. In the past, people used to describe people's skinny hands as chicken claws, but he felt like he was stretching out a chicken's claw. The skin was sticking to the bones, and there was almost no flesh left. Only the blue veins were moving up and down on the back of his hand. He stretched out his other hand and did the same thing. Rinbachian suddenly remembered that the guard couldn't recognize him previously. What have I become now? Rinbachian asked with a strange look on his face. Hong Wan, bring me the mirror, the Empress instructed faintly. Following which, Rinbachian saw in the mirror a skinny skeleton with almost no flesh under the skin. Rinbachian originally weighed 100 kilograms, but now he looked like he was only 25 to 30 kilograms. The loose clothes hung on his body as if they were wrapped in a piece of cloth. His exposed skin was full of cracks, making him look even more terrifying. Also, there was a trace of purple in his eyes. This is me. I didn't expect that your breakthrough this time would be so dangerous. You actually transformed a large amount of flesh and blood into essence and circulated it in your 5 viscera. If it was any worse, I'm afraid you would have become a dried corpse, the Empress said softly with a trace of lingering fear in her voice. If it wasn't for the fact that Rinbachian had eaten a lot of natural treasures, used the best medicinal herbs for cultivation, ate the best food, and was in peak condition, he would have become a dried corpse during this breakthrough. However, you will be able to recover after you eat more, the Empress said again. Rinbachian nodded, grabbed a fruit, and stuffed it into his mouth. After finishing all the fruits in the Empress's bedroom, Rinbachian didn't know if it was because of the effects of the drink or the fruits, but he felt a little more strength in his body. I can't wait for them to finish cooking. I'll go to the Imperial Kitchen. Rinbachian propped himself up and said. The Empress grabbed Rinbachian's collar and went to the entrance of the bedroom in a flash. After a while, they arrived at the Imperial Kitchen. The Empress put Rinbachian on the ground and said, You're too light. Rinbachian didn't reply and staggered into the Imperial Kitchen. When he smelled the aroma of food being cooked, his eyes turned green. Amidst the cries of the Imperial Kitchen cooks, he picked up a piece of cooked meat and started gnawing on it. Do what you need to do. Hurry up. The Empress followed behind Rinbachian and said to everyone, Yes, Your Majesty. Everyone did what they needed to do. Rinbachian was like a hungry ghost that had been starving for thousands of years. He ate a piece of meat in a few bites and immediately grabbed another piece of meat. In no time, he had finished the meat that the Empress had prepared. However, his hunger didn't seem to be alleviated at all. Rinpoche looked at the vegetables again. After eating a few mouthfuls, he couldn't take it anymore. He picked up a piece of raw meat and started gnawing on it. When he had eaten more than half of the horned beef and jumping lamb in the imperial kitchen, he took the freshly prepared food and poured it into his mouth. He ate this meal from the time he woke up until the sky turned dark. The cooks in the imperial kitchen were so busy that they were drenched in sweat. They finished everything in the imperial kitchen and asked the imperial court to send a batch of meat over before Rinpoche was satisfied. Phew! Rinpoche heaved a long sigh of relief. The strength that he hadn't felt in a long time had finally returned. Furthermore, it was even stronger than before. Rinpoche felt that he could beat up the little Lolita now. At the same time, his body expanded from being a bag of bones to being inflated like a balloon. Although he hadn't reached his original size, he at least looked like a human instead of a skeleton wrapped in a layer of skin. The most important thing was that the crazy hunger was finally gone. I'm finally alive. Rinpoche patted his belly and sighed. Rinpoche ate for the whole day, while the Empress sat by the side and waited for the whole day. During this period, she even sent someone to her bedroom to bring her manga over. The Empress raised her head and asked, "How do you feel now?" "Very good. I feel like I can smash a mountain." Rinpoche clenched his fists. His knuckles were cracking. The feeling of being full of strength was really great. Rinpoche looked down at his arm. It was covered in patches of dead skin that had been stretched open, revealing the new skin underneath. He casually tore a few times on his arm. The dead skin that was previously charred by the lightning fell off in large chunks, and the new skin underneath looked more tender than before. "It's good that you are fine. I'm also tired and will go back to rest." The Empress closed the manga, took a step forward, and disappeared without a trace. Although the Empress didn't do anything, she had been waiting for Rinpoche to wake up and had been worried about him. Now that Rinpoche was fine, she could finally relax. Chapter 699. His strength was obviously much stronger than before. Rinpoche tested it with a heavy object in a room and found that it had increased by about a quarter. His hands now had about 1,600 kilograms of strength. Coupled with the strength of his legs and waist, Rinpoche felt that he could use a car as a training tool. As for his speed, it was the biggest change. Rinpoche always felt that his body was light as a feather, as if he could jump with a little force. Rinpoche exerted force with his feet outside the room and rushed out like an arrow. Bang! "Sir Rin." The guards outside the courtyard rushed in. "I'm fine. Don't worry about me." Rinpoche rubbed his nose as the wall in front of him cracked. He thought back to the day when he had just broken through and was about to crash into a tree. His reaction at that time was much faster than it was now. It had to be said that people were forced to do what they could. When a person was extremely hungry, his body's potential could be unleashed. Rinpoche gently landed on the wall that was more than 3 meters high and landed on the opposite roof. In the blink of an eye, Rinpoche had covered a distance of tens of meters. He only saw a blur in front of his eyes before he landed on the roof and crushed 2 stone tiles on the way. Rinpoche estimated that it would only take him about 2 seconds to cover 100 meters. Previously, it would have taken him at least 5 seconds. This meant that his current speed was 2.5 times faster than before. He was even faster than the winged cavalry. The winged cavalry warriors hadn't just entered the Kismet heaven level. They had been there for decades, but Rinpoche was faster than them. Furthermore, he had just entered the Earth Wheel level and would probably be even faster in the future. In terms of strength, he was much weaker than the Kismet Heaven experts. The strength of an aboriginal Kismet Heaven expert was at least 1,000 kilograms, while the strength of the winged cavalry warriors was generally between 2,300 and 2,700 kilograms. Earthwheel experts were usually 1,500 kilograms. Rinpoche's 1,600 kilograms of strength was slightly stronger than that of an earth wheel expert, but much weaker than an aboriginal expert of the same level. Another important change was that the chi in his body was much more obvious than before. Previously, it was just scattered puddles that could only be sensed by careful sensing. In the blink of an eye, it would dissipate everywhere in his body. Now, it was like the Yangtze River, flowing endlessly between his internal organs. From time to time, essence blood would transform into essence chi and join the circulation. And from time to time, essence chi would dissipate into his limbs. Although it wasn't that clear, he could still feel it. Moreover, when he started to jump, he could feel essence chi flowing into his legs. Rinpoche had a rough idea of the changes that had occurred after he entered the earth wheel level. Seeing that it was already late at night, he entered his room and fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, Rinpoche woke up and went to the Empress's quarters. On the way, he met two imperial guards who greeted him from afar and cupped their hands. "Sir Run, we were rash that day and didn't recognize you. We apologize for offending you." "Forget it." Rinpoche waved his hand. Not to mention these two people, even his own mother wouldn't be able to recognize him. "The two of you are also doing your duty. The situation that day was special. You two can't be blamed. I knew Surin wasn't a stingy person. I'll treat you to a drink some other day." After bidding farewell to the two of them, Rinpoche went to the Empress's quarters and saw that she was sitting in front of a mirror as she groomed her. "Have you rested enough?" the Empress asked softly upon seeing Rinpoche enter. "I'm fine now." Rinpoche smiled. "I've caused your Majesty to worry. Your martial arts are a little strange. Such a situation wouldn't occur when a man-wheel expert breaks through to the earth wheel level, so I didn't expect it." "Fortunately, nothing happened," the Empress said faintly. "Previously, I asked other practitioners about the situation of breaking through to the earth wheel level, and it's indeed different. However, others practice step by step, and their bodies are full of chi and blood. Other people often practice for more than 10 years. During practice, they will naturally convert a small amount of blood essence into essence chi and slowly change their bodies. When breaking through, they don't need to consume so much chi and blood. However, I reached the sky in a single step. I first used medicinal herbs to nourish my body and used the 5 thoughts visualization to cultivate my internal organs from the inside out. I used more than a year to walk the path that others took more than 10 years to walk. Naturally, it's much more dangerous," Rinpoche said. He had already thought about the internal situation last night. "Well, it's good that you know. This martial art of yours was obtained from the treasury of the previous dynasty. Currently, no one knows the specifics. I'm afraid that there are many parts that aren't stated clearly, so you have to pay more attention. Fortunately, you were lucky enough to obtain the other volume of this martial art. Make more speculations to prevent this kind of thing from happening again. After all, you won't be so lucky every time," the Empress said faintly. "Okay," he responded softly and stood at the side, quietly watching the Empress dress up. The Empress was used to his gaze in the past, but this gaze made her feel a little different. She blushed and softly reprimanded. "What are you looking at?" Rinpoche pondered and said, "According to our customs, shouldn't I be asking you what's wrong?" The wooden box on the dressing table flew directly toward Rinpoche's head. Then it flew past him from 2 meters away. Rinpoche took a step back, reached out, and grabbed the box. After opening it, he found that it contained lipstick from the Yun Nation. Although he had bought a lot of lipstick on Earth, the Empress liked the fragrance of this lipstick more. "It smells so good." Rinpoche smiled after smelling it. The Empress raised her eyebrows and said, "You've become capable." Rinpoche looked at the Empress and smiled without saying anything. He had finally reached the earth wheel level. The Empress raised her eyebrows and blushed again. "Chase him out. He's disturbing me by standing there," the Empress said angrily. Qing Yuan stood at the side and winked at Rinpoche with a smile. "I'm waiting for your Majesty to have breakfast together." Rinpoche smiled, but he didn't stare at the Empress anymore. Otherwise, He would be the unlucky one if she became too embarrassed. After accompanying the Empress for breakfast, Ren Bachien hurried to the academy. When he came out of the palace, he happened to meet people who were waiting outside for the morning court session. The court session in Dayo didn't start at 5 a.m. like in ancient China, but at 7 a.m. Ren Bachien went to the academy at the same time as the court session, and there were already many people waiting outside the palace. Hey! Many people were stunned to see Ren Bachien. With so many people in the court, it was impossible for them not to see the change in Ren Bachien's cultivation level. Sir Ren has actually improved. This is really rare. Tonight, I'll celebrate with you at Yinyan Restaurant. As soon as he saw Ren Bachien, Tong Jingye welcomed him with a hearty laugh and slapped him with his palm the size of a cattail leaf fan. For Tong Jingye, there was nothing that couldn't be solved by a trip to a brothel. If there was, he would go there twice. In the face of Tong Jingye's slap, even though Ren Bachien wanted to run away, he didn't have the slightest strength to resist Tong Jingye's palm. In his eyes, Tong Jingye's palm, which was as big as a cattail leaf fan, seemed to cover the sky. No matter where he tried to retreat, the palm would land on his shoulder. 2 slaps nailed Ren Bachien to the ground. It's much sturdier than before. Tong Jingye sighed and clicked his tongue. Sir Tong, you can't invite Sir Ren to Yinyan Restaurant this time. Shirqing took a few steps forward and smiled. What's wrong? Tong Jingye was still a little respectful towards Shirqing, so he turned his body to face him and asked, since Sir Ren has already advanced to the Earth Wheel level, it's time to discuss Her Majesty's marriage. Shirqing stroked his beard and smiled. Back then, Her Majesty was stubborn and everyone wasn't optimistic. However, over the past year, Ren Bachien had demonstrated his ability and reached the Earth Wheel level half a year earlier than expected. This showed that Ren Bachien still had a certain level of talent and could improve further in the future. Tong Jingye was happy to see this happen. Ren Bachien pulled himself out of the ground, landed behind Shirqing in a flash, and said, I won't disturb you anymore. I'll take my leave now. After saying this, he turned around and ran away to avoid being slapped into the ground again. Comrade Shirqing is a good comrade. Ren Bachien sighed in his heart as he ran. Shirqing was still the most reliable person at critical moments. After Ren Bachien left, everyone started whispering to each other. They didn't expect Ren Bachien to break through to the Earth Wheel level so quickly, which was much faster than everyone expected. Most importantly, it seemed like Her Majesty's marriage would be put on the agenda. Chapter 700. His Majesty has arrived. In fact, even if no one announced it, everyone in the hall could completely sense that the Empress had arrived. Under everyone's gaze, the Empress walked across the hall and sat on the golden throne at the highest end. She slowly said, I have something to report. Following the Empress's voice, the hall was silent for a few seconds. Everyone looked at each other, but no one spoke. If there's nothing else, let's end the court session, the Empress said as she swept her gaze across the crowd. Tong Jingye stepped forward and said, I have something to report. The recent heavy rain has caused the dolomite mine to collapse in many places, and more than 70 people have been killed or injured. Prisoners of war? The Empress asked. Yes, Tong Jingye answered. The Empress felt a little strange. Why did he bring this matter up to the imperial court? Although Ren Bachien made the prisoners of war sound very important, in the hearts of everyone, the death of dozens of prisoners of war was as natural as rain today. After all, there were so many prisoners of war, and there were bound to be some who died of illness every day. Go back and deal with it yourself, the Empress replied casually. Who else has anything to report? The Water Empress looked around and said, If there's nothing else, the court is dismissed. Your Majesty, I also have something to report. Gu Yihong had no choice but to step forward under Tong Jingye's threatening gaze. The Empress furrowed her eyebrows. When she asked just now, no one spoke. When she said that the court session was over, all these people jumped out one by one. Speak. The sweet potatoes, pumpkins, and potatoes provided by Principal Ren are suitable for growing in Tianjing Basin. I would like to introduce these crops to Tianjin Basin to replace the wetland rice that is currently being grown in Tianjin Basin. After all, the yield of wetland rice was very low, and its value is not high. Most of the crops in Tianjin Basin are planted with this type of crop. If they're changed to sweet potatoes and other crops, the output can be increased by at least 5 times. Gu Yihong reported. Approved. The Empress nodded. Is there anyone else? The Empress looked around again and raised her eyebrows when she saw that everyone looked as though their souls had left their bodies. When Shi Qing, who was standing at the forefront, saw this, he quickly took a few steps forward and cupped his hands in salute. Your Majesty, I have something to report. Speak. I met Surin just now. He has just broken through to the earthwheel level, Shi Qing said. Indeed, the Empress immediately had a premonition that made her feel uneasy. Her Majesty and Sir Run are in love with each other. Previously, it was only because Sir Ren's cultivation level was too low that Her Majesty was unable to give birth to an heir. Now that Sir Run has broken through to the earthwheel level, it's time for Her Majesty's wedding, Shi Qing said slowly. The Empress felt as if she had been struck by lightning, and her whole body froze. Although she was already mentally prepared and liked Rinpochian very much, the mention of marriage made her feel like I just got up this morning and had nothing to do, so I came to attend court. Now you want to talk to me about marriage? I haven't even brushed my teeth. The feeling of being unable to defend against an arrow to the knee. Her gaze swept across the crowd, and everyone lifted their heads to stare at her. The Water Empress felt that she had not been so nervous in a long time. She felt as if there was a huge elephant jumping around in her chest. In an instant, the Empress blushed from her neck to her ears. This matter, we'll discuss it later. The Water Empress suppressed her emotions and tried her best to speak slowly. She felt that she was not ready yet. Could it be that Her Majesty is dissatisfied with Sir Ren? Do you want to find another husband? Shi Qing's wrinkled face revealed his white teeth. That's not it. The Empress waved her hand, and her heart beat even faster. Your Majesty's talent is unparalleled, and your cultivation level is increasing day by day. However, it isn't difficult to find a man who can have a child with you. Shi Qing laughed. However, if Sir Ren makes another breakthrough, he may not be able to keep up with your Majesty's pace. Even if he can keep up, who knows how long it will be before he can. If your Majesty feels that there is nothing wrong with Sir Ren, please settle the marriage as soon as possible so that I and the others can rest assured. In the future, when your Majesty gives birth to a child, there will be nothing to worry about. Please arrange it as soon as possible, Your Majesty. Qin Chuan, Tu Wan, and the others stepped forward. Everyone could see that the Empress liked Rinpochian very much. Since that was the case, it was better to settle the marriage as soon as possible so that the Empress could give birth to a child. This was also a good thing. The Empress was already a little embarrassed and nervous, but when she saw everyone speaking up, she immediately became angry and asked, "Are you forcing me?" As she spoke, she raised her eyebrows, and an ominous glint flashed in her eyes. We just hope that Your Majesty's marriage can be settled as soon as possible so that we can rest assured, everyone said. Forget it. You can make the arrangements and report to me later. The Empress raised her eyebrows and said in a low voice. After that, he stood up and walked out of the main hall. Not long after, his face turned red and steam began to rise from his head. White steam rose up to a height of 10 feet. From afar, he looked like a moving human-shaped chimney. Thinking that she was actually going to marry that guy, the Empress felt that her brain was about to overload and stop working. After the Empress escaped, everyone looked at each other and smiled. Even Tong Jinye and Qin Chuan, who were usually at odds with each other, didn't pick on each other. It could be said that everyone had watched the Empress grow up. Even if the Empress's identity was disregarded, an event like the wedding of the Empress was extremely important to them. Deo has not been established for a long time, and Your Majesty is the only woman. There is really no precedent. How is this marriage going to be arranged? Is it going to be arranged according to the customs of Grand Xia or according to our ancient race's customs? Qin Chuan had a strange expression on his face. Of course, we'll follow the ancient race's rules. Zhuyin, the Minister of Justice, grinned. Then, everyone's expression turned strange. According to the Aboriginals' marriage arrangements, the parents had to go to the Aboriginals' house to discuss the marriage. No one knew where the old emperor had gone, and no one had heard of Rinpoche's parents. This was easy to arrange. Then, he would send over a number of prey. This would depend on the strength of the man. The stronger the prey, the stronger the man, and the more respect he would have. The problem was the beating of the bride. Yes, a kiss. The woman's family had to send out experts to block the way, and the man had to fight his way up, and in the end, he had to defeat the woman herself. Of course, after the betrothal, the bride's family would send people to stop them. This was mainly to show off their strength. Simply put, it was to show off their muscles so that they wouldn't be bullied in the future. As long as the male side displayed his strength, it would be fine. Usually, they would exchange 3 to 10 moves depending on the situation at the time. As for getting past the girl herself, if they were in love with each other, the girl would go easy on him. However, with Rinpoche's small physique, even if he went easy on them, who could he beat? Even if he went easy on them, he couldn't beat them. He would fall to the ground with just one finger. After all, the Aboriginals respected the strong, and it was rare for a woman to find a husband who was weaker than her. Even if he was slightly weaker, the difference wouldn't be too big, and the ceremony would be more or less acceptable. However, the Empress found such a weak husband, which was rare among the Aboriginals. Even if she wanted to go easy on him, it'd be difficult. Needless to say, there would definitely be a few officials from the court blocking the way, most likely Hong Wu. Then what? Rinpoche stretched out his finger, and Hong Wu would fall to the ground? Even if Hong Wu was too strong, Tong Jinye and the others wouldn't be able to do it. These people still had a sense of shame. Even if they were acting, they couldn't act so fake. Not to mention the Empress herself. He wouldn't be able to beat her even if her hands and feet were tied up. If they followed the customs of the Aboriginals, how would they beat the bride? Why don't we follow the customs of Great Xia? Tuan suggested. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for our Aboriginal Empress to marry according to the customs of Great Xia. If word gets out, we will be ridiculed. Someone immediately objected. Everyone nodded. They didn't even need to think about the customs of Great Xia. Even though Her Majesty had agreed, it was difficult for everyone to arrange the wedding. After all, there was no precedent. Furthermore, Rinpoche was too weak. Why don't we discuss this matter later and set the date of the wedding first? Xianhua, the Minister of Rights, frowned. Should we inform the General-in-Chief who supports the nation? Someone else asked. After all, Hong Wu and the Empress had a very good relationship. Even though they weren't like father and daughter, they were close. How could they not let Hong Wu know about this? In that case, use the radio to contact Hong Wu first. Everyone else, go back and think about how to arrange the wedding and see if there are any good ideas. Shi Qing said. Chapter 701. His Majesty's Marriage. Hong Wu thought for a while after hearing the content from the radio. I will return as soon as possible. Madam Hong, this matter is not urgent. The matters at the front lines are more urgent. The soldiers of Great Xia were stationed at the front line. If Sir Hong returned, what would happen to the 30,000 soldiers and hundreds of thousands of civilians? Just leave these matters to us. Right now, the main thing is that we haven't set a date for the wedding yet. Shi Qing said in a deep voice. Naturally, we have to kill Great Xia first. Initially, I wanted to let them wear down some of their soldiers. Don't worry, Great Elder, I know what I'm doing. As for the wedding date, I think I need to think about it carefully. Hong Wu strode out of the room after he finished speaking. Bring me my saber, Hong Wu shouted as he walked out of the door. My lord? Someone revealed a puzzled expression. However, someone quickly ran to Hong Wu's side with a long-handled broadsword. Hong Wu stretched out his hand and took it. He raised the long saber to the sky and swung it down. The house in front of Hong Wu was instantly split into two. Hong Wu threw the saber to the guard and said, Go and check the flashbangs. There must not be any mistakes. Also, get someone to watch the weather and inform me at any time. Yes, from today onwards, when the battalions are defending the city during the day, the time that each battalion spends guarding the city will be reduced to 6 hours. The rest of the time, you are to recuperate and build up your strength, awaiting my orders. My lord, aren't you being too hasty? The deputy general beside him immediately stepped forward and asked. He instantly understood the meaning behind Hong Wu's order. If that's what you think, then Great Xia will naturally think the same. No matter what, they wouldn't have thought that I would attack. At night, they would use flash grenades to launch a surprise attack. Then, they would harass, divide, and strangle them. Firstly, the opponent was caught off guard, and secondly, he was blinded by the flash grenade. In his panic, he was like a piece of meat on a chopping board. I still don't understand why you suddenly made such a decision. If that's the case, the other party will retreat back to Tiesua Pass when they see that the situation is not good. The deputy general was puzzled. If they only had the original 20,000 soldiers, it would be good if they could defend the city. Fortunately, another 10,000 soldiers were transferred over. Although they were new soldiers, the ordinary aboriginals had considerable fighting strength. These new soldiers were recruited from the villages in the 60,000 mountains. This way, the Protectorate of the North would have a little more ability to counterattack. It was only when 20,000 stun grenades were delivered from the rear that Hong Wu finally had the ability to keep the Great Xia soldiers here. However, 30,000 soldiers were still not enough to keep the 500,000 soldiers of Great Xia here. After all, Ping City was so close to Tiesua Pass that it would take less than a day's journey to get there. Even if the surprise attack was successful, the enemy would naturally retreat after suffering a great defeat. Even if all 30,000 troops were to attack and kill their way through, at least half of the remaining 430,000 troops will be able to retreat back to Tiesua Pass. According to the original plan, they would first whittle down a third of the enemy's forces at the foot of the city, then break through the enemy's main camp in one fell swoop. After that, they would kill their way through. At most, the enemy would have 50 to 80,000 soldiers left to retreat. Hong Wu frowned slightly. His heart was not calm. If the Empress's marriage didn't happen, he would naturally follow the original plan. However, he couldn't wait any longer. Even though he could use the radio station to communicate, he still wanted to make a trip back to Lan City. He said solemnly, "You go ahead and make the arrangements. I have my own arrangements." After sending the deputy away, Hong Wu went to the hall and looked at the map on the table in silence. He then drew a circle around Tiesua Pass and the other two border passes of Great Xia. Ren Baqian's breakthrough to the Earth Wheel level caused quite a stir in the academy. They were still guessing what had happened when Ren Baqian didn't come to class for the past 2 days. They didn't expect him to break through secretly. Even though an Earth Wheel expert wasn't considered an expert, it took Ren Baqian less than 2 years to go from an ordinary person to an Earth Wheel expert. This speed made those students rather envious and jealous. Of course, Tong Lan was the most unhappy one. She felt that there wouldn't be many opportunities for her to take revenge while practicing martial arts. At least, it wouldn't be as easy as before. Ren Baqian had just broken through. She should put more effort into practicing martial arts next time. If Ren Baqian knew what Tong Lan was thinking, he would definitely feel that he had given the students too little homework. They probably hadn't seen what it meant to have a sea of homework and questions. However, Ren Baqian was in a good mood. After suffering for so many years, he was finally going to become a wife. On the way to the Empress's quarters, he saw someone who shouldn't be there coming out of the Empress's quarters. This made him wonder if his eyes were playing tricks on him. It was Lin Shaola, who had delicate features, carried a pair of A's, and spent 24 hours a day eating, sleeping, and drooling. Ren Baqian had always equated her with a pig. The only difference was that she could fight better than a pig. After returning from Tianjing Basin, he hadn't seen Lin Shaola anywhere else other than when he went to Qingxin Palace Hall to see her snoring away. He didn't know which direction the sun rose from today, but Lin Shaola actually came out from Qingxin Palace Hall. Sniff! When Lin Shaola saw him, She jumped to his side and sniffed. Then, she placed her hand on the back of his waist and moved downward again and again. She pulled the bag of sweets that was hanging on his waist and beamed with joy. Lin Xiaola's eyes lit up. Why did you come out? Rinpoche didn't care about the bag of sweets and felt that it was strange. Grandma wants to see Her Majesty, but she can't come out. Lin Xiaola happily grabbed a piece of chocolate from the bag, skillfully peeled it, and threw it into her mouth. Then her face twitched. Uffed. What's this taste? Why is it so disgusting? Lin Xiaola spat a few mouthfuls of saliva and looked lifeless. Rinpoche glanced at it and saw that it was indeed dark chocolate with 90% cocoa content. He had to admit that this thing was really disgusting. To describe it, it was similar to drinking Chinese medicine without rock sugar. That day, when he was buying sweets at the supermarket, he accidentally caught it and mixed it with the sweets. Even the Empress fell for it once. Librarian Lin can't come out? Rinpoche was curious about the other sentence that Lin Xiaola said. Grandma is afraid of light. She never comes out during the day, Lin Xiaola said with a bitter face. She felt that her tongue was full of bitterness, and she only felt better after throwing a few pieces of sweets in her mouth. Then she beamed with joy. He had to admit that Lin Xiaola was a person who was easily satisfied. There's such a thing. Rinpoche was slightly surprised as this was the first time he heard of it. It's been so many years. In any case, I have never seen Grandma come out, Lin Xiaola muttered, then waved at Rinpoche and said, Grandma looking for Her Majesty has something to do with you. You will know when the time comes. Let's go. Something to do with me? Could it be related to my martial arts? Rinpoche thought for a while and then went to see the Empress. She was sitting on the couch in a daze. Her eyes weren't focused, and no one knew what she was thinking. Your Majesty? The Empress trembled when she heard his voice as if she was shocked. What are you thinking about, Your Majesty? Rinpoche asked with a smile. Just a small matter. The Empress's gaze drifted away, and it was obvious that she didn't mean it. She then calmed herself down, sat upright, and said with a serious face, I have something important to tell you. Please speak, Your Majesty, Rinpoche said. The Empress looked at Rinpoche with a serious face. Then her mind was in chaos, and her head began to emit hot air. It was like steam rising more than 3 meters high. The Empress looked away and said, It's nothing, Your Majesty. This move must be the legendary gathering of 3 flowers and 5 energies toward one's origin. It's really an eye-opener for me. Rinpoche exclaimed. The Empress blushed from her neck to her ears. Is there really nothing else, Your Majesty? Rinpoche looked at the Empress's attitude and asked with a smile. There's nothing else. The Empress tried to calm her voice. Really? Chapter 702. Your Majesty, you have been brushing your teeth for almost an hour. Isn't it time to go to Qingxin Palace Hall? What exactly do you want to do there? Rinpoche leaned against the door and looked at the Empress speechlessly. 6 toothbrushes were broken in less than an hour. What did the toothbrush do wrong? If it were someone else, their gums would have been ground out. The Empress paused for a while, threw the toothbrush to Qin Yuan, and walked out. Let's go. What's on your mind today, Your Majesty? Rinpoche asked as he followed behind the Empress. Nothing. I'm fine, the Empress replied without turning her head. Rinpoche smiled. He knew why the Empress lost her composure today, and it was rather amusing to see her like this. When they entered the courtyard of Qingxin Palace Hall, they saw Lin Xiaola sprawled on the ground, drooling as she slept. She didn't care about the strong sunlight shining on her body, and she was still clutching the bag of sweets tightly. Cough! Rinpoche coughed dryly, and Lin Xiaola immediately jumped up from the ground. Your Majesty! Lin Xiaola wiped her saliva, looked down at the bag of sweets in her hand, and then looked at the person in front of her. She hesitated for a while and reluctantly handed the bag over. The Empress glanced at it and said, Keep it. She couldn't be more familiar with that bag, and she knew what was inside without taking it. Lin Shaola immediately stuffed the bag of sweets in her arms and led the way. You guys wait outside. The Empress turned to Qing Yuan, Hong Wan, and the guards who followed her. Yes, follow me in. The Empress glanced at Rinpochian. The three of them entered Qingxin Palace Hall and went straight to the second floor. At the top of the stairs, they heard violent coughing sounds. The second floor was still as dark as ever. Your Majesty, I pay my respects to you. Supervisor Lin stood at the top of the stairs and greeted the Empress. You don't have to be so polite. The Empress waved her hand. You must have something to say to me. Allow me to see Principal Ren's condition first, Supervisor Lin said. The Empress nodded slightly, and Rinpochian stepped forward and stood in front of Supervisor Lin. Supervisor Lin sized Rinpochian up and stretched out her withered palm to grab his shoulder. Rinpochian didn't dodge and let her grab his shoulder. However, Supervisor Lin's grip on Rinpochian's shoulder was unexpectedly strong. Her fingers seemed to have dug halfway into Rinpochian's shoulder, causing him to feel a stinging pain. Following which, Supervisor Lin pressed on Rinpochian's spine a few more times before taking a few steps back and saying, In theory, Sir Run and Her Majesty can have children, but Rinpochian and the Empress frowned. No matter who you are, you don't like to hear but, because it means that there are other things to say later. However, I'm afraid that Sir Ren's physical strength can't withstand Her Majesty's strength. Her Majesty can injure Sir Run unintentionally. I'm sure both of you are aware of this. Librarian Lin continued. On the spot, Rinpochian wanted to say Motherf asterisk her. Supervisor Lin's words didn't sound right. Faced with such blatant words, the Empress's face looked as if it was stained with blood. Steam was coming out of her head again. This is what I expected, which is why I invited Her Majesty and Sir Rin here, Librarian Lin said unhurriedly. Rinpochian stepped forward and said, Librarian Lin, please speak your mind. Looking at the Empress's steaming appearance, he didn't think that she would open her mouth at this moment. Furthermore, what Librarian Lin said was what he had been considering. Originally, he thought that he could solve the problem with the unlocking posture, but now, it seemed like there was a better way. There's a manual called Yang Boosting Technique in Qingxin Palace Hall. After practicing it, blood and qi will directly penetrate the surface of the body and greatly increase the strength of the body. This technique is a secret technique passed down by the Han Nation's royal family, and the successive emperors of the Han Nation have been practicing it since childhood. In the past, Sir Rin didn't have enough primordial yang energy. If he were to forcefully practice it, I'm afraid that he would exhaust his blood essence. Now that he has broken through to the so-called earth wheel level, he can start practicing this technique, Librarian Lin said. How long does it take to practice this technique? Rinpochian asked curiously. The effect can be seen in as little as 3 months. However, it isn't easy to practice this technique. This technique is divided into 2 types, the main one and the supplementary one. Back then, when the men of the Han Nation's imperial family practiced this technique, they would choose 18 talented young girls to practice together as human furnaces to supplement the yang within. They would form a group of 6 to deal with the 3 levels of ordinary people, man wheel, and earth wheel. When these young girls reached a certain level of cultivation in the supplementary technique, they would choose the one with the lowest level to be used as a human furnace while the rest would continue to practice. Every time the person who practiced the main technique reached a new level, they would need the corresponding young girls who practiced the supplementary technique as human furnaces. After the remaining 12 young girls reached the man wheel level, the 6 with the slowest cultivation would be kept as human furnaces. After the rest broke through to the earth wheel level, they would be used as human furnaces for the person who practiced the main technique. It is said that after reaching the spirit wheel level, a spirit wheel human furnace is still needed. However, which spirit wheel expert would dare to use them as human furnaces? Librarian Lin said unhurriedly. The content of her words made Rinpochian and the Empress's expressions change. However, Neither of them said anything and allowed the old woman in front of them to continue speaking. The main point of this technique is to supplement the yang with yin and assist the growth of yang. If slight changes are made, there will be a shortcut. There's a price to pay for this shortcut, which is that one can only reach the beginner level of this technique. After improving one's physical body to a certain level, one can't go any further. What is needed is the primordial yin of 6 earth wheel level women and their cultivation. Ren Bachin grinned. This technique sounded like it belonged to the coquettish and cheap type. It was indeed different from the proper technique that he practiced. However, he decided to forget about this technique. This old woman definitely had ill intentions when she mentioned it. The Empress was silent for a while and said in a deep voice, "I understand. I will get someone to capture 6 people from the Yun Nation who meet the criteria. Is there enough time? If it's within 3 months, then there's enough time." Minister Lin said, "Your Majesty, I don't need to practice this technique. I can find another external technique to practice." Ren Baqian was surprised. "Shut up. Don't be anxious. I haven't finished speaking. Although this technique has been modified, the main and supplementary techniques haven't changed. The other party must practice the supplementary techniques. If the person we capture refuses to practice the supplementary techniques, it will be useless. Find someone who is concerned about the sect. Put a knife to their neck, and they will naturally be willing," the Empress said with a cold face. Ren Baqian was touched. Even he felt that this technique was a little excessive, let alone the Empress. Even though the veins on the Empress's neck were about to pop out, she still made such a choice. How could not be touched by her decision given her status? "Your Majesty, I will never practice this technique. I will find another external technique," Ren Baqian said in a deep voice. "You are not willing." The Empress glared at him with a cold face. "After spending so much time with your Majesty, I'm afraid that seeing other women is like seeing a skeleton. Your Majesty, do you think that I can use a skeleton as a cultivation vessel?" Ren Baqian gave the Empress a smile that he felt was very kind. "Then is it my fault? Should I say sorry?" The Empress was obviously very jealous, but she had to pretend to be magnanimous when it concerned Ren Baqian. She was very angry. The Empress definitely wasn't the type to smile even when she was angry. Her face immediately turned cold. Chapter 703. Your Majesty and Sir Run, don't be anxious. I'm not done yet. Supervisor Lin continued to speak unhurriedly. Actually, this technique has been modified by this old woman. There are 2 cultivation methods. One is the human cauldron technique that this old woman just mentioned. Another way is to borrow the earth Yin spring in the 60,000 mountains. Ren Baqian and the Empress immediately stared at Supervisor Lin with murderous eyes. "Why didn't you say so earlier that there was another way? Are you teasing us on purpose?" If Ren Baqian couldn't wait to agree just now, or if the Empress didn't agree, it would probably leave a knot in their hearts. Fortunately, the Empress was magnanimous and Ren Baqian knew what to do. Both of them were touched. In addition, the Empress was extremely jealous. That old bastard was really not a good person. Ren Baqian immediately labeled Supervisor Lin in his mind. However, this method is extremely dangerous. The Earthine Spring is extremely special. Rumor has it that this Earthine Spring connects the 2 realms of life and death, but no one knows if this is true or not. However, the Earthine Spring was extremely dangerous. Even if an ordinary person touched it, they would be disturbed by the dark illusions, not to mention using it to cultivate. It's fine if you have a strong will. Otherwise, I'm afraid you won't be able to endure the attacks of the illusions. If you go down, you won't be able to come back up. Ren Baqian furrowed his eyebrows and asked, "Librarian Lin, are there no other ways to train the physical body? This is the shortest time. The other techniques would take months and years to show their effects. I'm afraid it's too late. Only this kind of shortcut can speed things up." Supervisor Lin squeezed out a smile on her wizened old face. "Let's use the second method then," Ren Baqian said. After practicing the Rui visualization, he had some confidence in his willpower. What kind of ghost attacks could compare to the various kinds of life and death experiences in the 5 visions? Furthermore, he could send the spring water back to Earth for testing. Why did he have to let the Empress have such a huge hold on him? What if the Empress wanted to settle the score with him one day? Wouldn't he be out of luck then? Use the first method, the Empress said. Your Majesty. Rinpochian wanted to speak. I have the final say, the Empress interrupted him. Your Majesty, what if I can't get hard when I see them? Rinpochian spread his hands. The Empress's forehead began to emit steam, and the veins on her neck were throbbing. She slapped Rinpochian's body. Bang! There's a hole in the wall. Only the Empress, Librarian Lin, and Lin Shaola were left in Qingxin Palace Hall. Now that it's quiet, let's use the first method, the Empress said coldly as if a layer of ice had been scraped off her face. He had made up his mind that he would definitely find 6 women for Rinpochian that would make him feel so miserable that he would rather die the moment he saw them. He couldn't possibly let Rinpochian off easy. Rinpochian felt dizzy and disoriented. He flew a long distance in the air before smashing through a roof and falling. Boom! My waist is about to break. Rinpochian gasped for a long time and then saw someone looking at him from a distance. He was looking at himself in the barrel. Are you taking a bath? Rinpochian squeezed out a good-natured smile. Yes. Xian just sat in the bucket with a cold expression. Her shoulders and neck were exposed outside the bucket, and her hair was completely disheveled. Her Majesty threw me here, Rinpochian said seriously after thinking for a while. He really couldn't take the blame for this, nor could he afford to. I guessed it. Xian continued to look at him coldly. You live in the palace? I didn't know about it before. Rinpochian lay on the ground and looked around. The decorations were very simple and crude, and there was even a knife hanging on the wall. However, the small ornaments in the room looked quite cute, and he felt that this might be Xian's residence. I have a residence in the city, but I rest here most of the time. Her Majesty gave me special permission to do so. Since Rinpochian asked, Xian answered truthfully. From her expression, one couldn't tell what she was thinking. Oh, Rinpochian nodded. You're not leaving? Xian asked coldly when she saw that Rinpochian wasn't going to get up. My waist is about to break. I need to rest for a while. Rinpochian gasped. I'm done bathing. I'm leaving. After Xian finished speaking, she stood up from the bucket with the sound of water splashing. She took a step out of the bucket, picked up a piece of cloth from the side, and wiped her body clean. Then, she put on her vest, safety pants, and armor. Rinpochian stared blankly at that pair of D's jumping and her perky buttocks and other things that shouldn't be seen. After all, no one wore clothes when they bathed at home. Xian didn't try to hide her actions. She didn't seem to understand these things. Don't touch the things in the room, Xian said to Rinpochian after putting on the armor. Got it. Take care. Rinpochian responded obediently and watched as Xian left the room. Rinpochian lay on the ground, looked at the big hole in the ceiling beam, smelled the lingering fragrance in the air, and sighed. Such is life. After lying on the ground for a long time, he finally got up with his hands on his waist and strolled around the room. His main focus was on the wooden ornaments, a black gentleman and 2 monkeys. They looked very lifelike, and he didn't expect Xian to like them. Then, he strolled to the Empress's palace, where she was already waiting. Your Majesty, I remember you saying that you want to go back and see my mother's grave, Rinpochian said. I should indeed make a trip there. The Empress's face was cold, and she didn't look too happy. The word unhappy was written all over her face. I'll accompany your Majesty and take a look at the earthine spring. If possible, I still want to give it a try. With your Majesty by my side, you should be able to pull me out if something goes wrong, right? If it doesn't work, we can use another method and make 2 preparations, Rinpochian said. He really didn't want the Empress to arrange this. Not only would the Empress be unhappy, but he would also get into trouble. The Empress was stunned. She didn't expect Rinpochian to bring this up. However, Rinpochian's words make sense. She doesn't know what's going on with the earthine spring, so it's good to go and take a look. At the thought of this, The Empress's face relaxed a lot. Then, she hesitated for a while and said seriously, "When I chose you as my husband, I decided that you had to reach the Earth Wheel level. Now that you have reached that level, everyone in the Imperial Court has to make preparations. I really want to visit my mother's grave before that. After all, my father has been missing for a long time, and only my mother is still there. No matter what, you have to come with me. It's good to take a look at the Earthine Spring. According to Librarian Lin, if you succeed in practicing with the Earthine Spring, the effect will be better than using a human cauldron. However, if it doesn't work out, you will have to use a human cauldron to practice." "What do you want, Your Majesty?" Rinpoche asked. The Empress was silent for a while before saying, "Of course, I don't want that. In the past, I was used to living in the palace and never felt that there was anything wrong. With you, the excitement has passed. Now, I'm afraid of being lonely and afraid that something will happen to you. I want you to accompany me, be happy with me, be sad with me, watch the moon with me, drink with me." The Empress's sudden reveal of her true feelings made Rinpoche's heart warm up. He wanted to accompany the Empress like this until the end, just like what he said before. "When I'm really unhappy, I can still hit you and be happy." "Your Majesty, you don't have to say this," Rinpoche said seriously. The Empress suddenly smiled and swept away the coldness on her body. She picked up the wine pot from the side of the couch and poured 2 cups of wine. "One for me, one for you." After finishing her sentence, she drank the wine in one gulp and poured another cup. "Therefore, you can go and take a look at the Earthine Spring. If it doesn't work, you will have to use a human cauldron. Don't worry, I will find you 6 of the ugliest and oldest ones. This way I won't mind." "Your Majesty, you don't have to say that." Rinpoche shuddered at the thought of the 6 older sister foam. Chapter 704. In any case, everything could only be decided after seeing the Een Spring in the 60,000 mountains. Whatever the Empress decided, he would let her decide. In any case, Rinpoche was determined to train at the Earth Een Spring in the 60,000 mountains. For the next few days, apart from attending classes, Rinpoche focused on training. After this breakthrough, his body had changed a lot. Both his strength and speed had been greatly improved, and he wouldn't be able to control his body if he didn't train. It was like a child holding a 50-kilogram broadsword. A broadsword was very lethal, but it was useless if one couldn't control it. Instead, it would be a burden. This was Rinpoche's situation. After training for 3 days, Rinpoche felt that he had improved his control over his body. He asked the Empress to call Tong Lan to the palace to spar with him. The Empress was surprised by Rinpoche's request. This was the first time that he had taken the initiative to spar with Tong Lan without being forced. "How rare. It's not like you at all," the Empress said frankly. "Your Majesty, you are looking down on me." Rinpoche laughed. "After all, I can improve the fastest in high-intensity sparring. Sometimes, I recall the day when I woke up and went crazy from hunger. On the way to the Imperial kitchen, I encountered 2 guards, but I was able to dodge them with ease. However, after I woke up, that feeling disappeared, and I couldn't even control my body properly. What do you think is the reason?" The Empress looked at him and asked. Rinpoche pondered for a while and said, "Perhaps I'm the kind of person who becomes stronger when facing strong opponents. Only under pressure can I unleash my small universe. Originally, this talent was concealed, but it was awakened after I broke through to the Earth Wheel level." The Empress looked at him blankly. She was shocked by his words. After a while, she said, "I roughly know what's going on with you. You are indeed worthy of being called Your Majesty. Even I couldn't detect it, but you detected it so quickly." Rinpoche was delighted to hear this. The talent that he had hidden for so many years was finally going to be unleashed. "I did detect it." The Empress nodded. "You did detect it. You actually became arrogant. You actually dared to take the initiative to spar with Tong Lan. You could even unleash your small universe." That afternoon, Rinpoche wore Li-Ning shorts and stood on the court. Opposite him was the little Lolita, Tong Lan, who was dressed in white. She looked up at him with a mischievous expression. On the other hand, the Empress was sitting on a chair, eating fruits and watching anime. Behind her were Qing Yuan and Hong Wuan. One of them was holding an umbrella while the other was preparing an ice basin and using a fan to blow cold air onto the Empress's body. Ren Baqian felt a little excited. After being beaten up for so long, he could finally display his strength. With his extraordinary speed, he felt that he had a high chance of winning this time. He would definitely give the little lowly a surprise. He could also improve his control over his body through battling with her. It was really several things in one go. Let me play some background music first. Ren Baqian turned to the side and made a selection on the laptop. Immediately, the external interface started playing impassioned music. After that, Ren Baqian realized that the little Lolita was even more excited than him when listening to this epic electronic music. Her little head was nodding bit by bit. You can relax. Anyway, I've never won before, Ren Baqian said. The little Lolita looked askance at him and said, I've never been nervous before. Do you know what's the big problem I discovered after breaking through to the Earthwheel level? Ren Baqian asked. Not only Earthwheel experts, but also Kismet Heaven experts. What is it? Tonglan's attention was immediately attracted by his words. Even though she didn't give Ren Baqian a good look, she was still very impressed by his knowledge. Even the Empress raised her head. It's much stronger than a man-wheel expert. Ren Baqian suddenly jumped up, crossed more than 10 meters in one step, and kicked straight at Tonglan's face. Tonglan stretched out her palm to block, but Ren Baqian did a somersault in midair. His other leg moved like a windmill and directly hooked Tonglan's jaw. The back of Ren Baqian's foot collided with Tonglan's palm and produced a loud bang. Then, Ren Baqian was kicked away by Tonglan. Ren Baqian spun and landed at the side of the arena. He landed heavily on the ground, turned over, and got up. His face was no longer as relaxed as before. He could sense Tonglan's kick just now, but his body couldn't keep up with his brain's reaction speed. The last time he met the Imperial Guards on the way to the Imperial Kitchen on a rainy night, he felt the same way. The brain's reaction speed was much faster than the body's. His brain had already sensed it and knew how to dodge it, but he couldn't dodge it and his body couldn't keep up. This feeling always made him feel very uncomfortable, as if there was a delay in his brain's command of his body. This situation was very difficult to detect during normal training, but it was extremely obvious during sparring. The following sparring sessions also confirmed this point. There were many times when he could clearly sense her movements, but he just couldn't dodge it. After being hit by Tonglan more than 10 times in a row, Ren Baqian felt that his body was about to fall apart before stopping today's sparring session. In any case, I've improved a lot. Ren Baqian lay on the ground and panted. Tonglan looked at him, raised her small face, and said, Improvement? You're thinking too much. It doesn't exist. Ren Baqian immediately made up his mind to double tomorrow's homework. Listening to the background music coming from the side, Ren Baqian sighed faintly. Sure enough, he had never won with his own background music. After Tonglan left, Ren Baqian described what he felt just now to the Empress. The Empress frowned and pondered for a long time before saying with some doubt, Under normal circumstances, such a situation wouldn't occur. Instead, it was difficult for me to recover my strength for a month after burning my essence blood. That feeling was similar to what you described. Under normal circumstances, a person's physical body and spirit are equivalent. The level of the physical body corresponds to the level of the spirit. This is the case for every martial art. The situation that you described gave me the feeling that the spirit had surpassed the physical body. For example, when you were originally at the man-wheel level, your physical and spirit values were 5. After attaining the earth wheel level, one's physical and spiritual attributes would normally be 20. However, your physical and spirit values were 20, which is completely incompatible with your physical body. That's why such a situation occurred. It's like a 6-passenger car with 10 people in it. Take me, for example. For example, my spirit value is 100, and my physical value is also 100. After burning my essence blood, my physical value drops to 30, but my spirit value is still 100. Under such circumstances, the body will not be able to be commanded according to my will." Rinpoche frowned. He could easily understand the Empress's explanation. To put it simply, it was like an Alto with a racing engine installed. A racing engine was naturally very good, but when installed in an Alto, it couldn't be utilized at all and would cause all kinds of problems. As for the reason, I guess it might be the influence of the Rui visualization that you practice. According to your description, this set of cultivation method will indeed have an impact on the divine soul when cultivating. Do you still remember the second volume of the ancient scroll of methods? After practicing Rui visualization, one can start practicing it after reaching the earth will level. If one hasn't practiced Rui visualization before, one can only practice it after reaching the spirit will level. I'm afraid this is the reason. After listening to the Empress, Rinpoche felt that this was most likely the case. After pondering for a while, Rinpoche suddenly thought of something. If the spirit greatly surpassed the physical body after practicing this martial art, then the way of fighting should be different from ordinary martial arts, right? There should be a special way to use the spirit, right? 10,000 techniques. 10,000 techniques. No wonder it's called 10,000 techniques. I'm afraid that the mystery lies here. In other words, he had to find a way to find the second volume in the future. Otherwise, wouldn't he become a level 60 spellcaster who hadn't learned any skills? Chapter 705. When Rinpoche returned to the palace from the academy, he happened to meet Shi Qing in front of the palace gate. In other words, Shi Qing was waiting for him. "Congratulations, Sir Ren." Shi Qing's wrinkled face moved as he cupped his hands and smiled at Rinpoche. Where did the congratulations come from? Rinpoche rubbed his eyebrows. He had been busy recently and had been pondering about Rui visualization for a few days. The Empress had guessed that after practicing this technique, her soul would be far superior to others. In fact, her physical body wouldn't be weaker than others. The origin of this technique probably wasn't simple. Rinpoche had been pondering about this for the past few days. In addition, he was wondering where to find the third volume. The first volume was in the Hao Nation, and the second volume was in Great Xia. What about the third volume? In fact, apart from Rinpoche, only spirit wheel experts could use this manual. This was because only spirit wheel experts had the strength of their souls. He should first find out the background of all the spirit wheel experts in the world, especially those with strange techniques. He might be able to find out something from them. Which spirit wheel expert was a nameless person? One could imagine how difficult it was to find out the background of all the spirit wheel experts in the world. In addition to this, there was another important reason. He had been having nightmares recently. He had been dreaming about the elderly version of Sister Feng several times and would wake up in a cold sweat. If this went on, he would wither before he could get married. There was a saying that what you think about in the day, you dream at night. However, he had been thinking about the ancient scroll of methods every day. Why did he keep dreaming about it? What kind of hatred did he have? Everyone minded their own business, so why couldn't you stay away from me? Recently, the entire court has been discussing Her Majesty's marriage. What are you worried about, Sir Ren? Could it be that you're dissatisfied? Shi Qing's face darkened when he saw Rinpoche's worried expression. Great Elder, you misunderstood. Rinpoche immediately reacted when he saw that Shi Qing was unhappy. All along, Tong Jinye and Shi Qing had been the friendliest to him in the court. However, Tong Jinye, that old man, relied on his strength and would slap Rinpoche into the ground from time to time as if he was smashing a mole. Looking at it this way, Shi Qing was the only good person in the entire court. Rinpoche didn't have much of a reaction even after tearing down his walls several times. No matter what, Rinpoche didn't want Shi Qing to misunderstand him on this matter. If others misunderstood that he was so worried about marrying the Empress, he was afraid that he would be stabbed to death behind his back. She frowned and hesitated for a moment before telling Shirqing about her troubles in the past 2 days. She mainly talked about the nightmare. I see. Shirqing stroked his beard and said, however, it is a great honor to be able to marry Her Majesty. There are millions of Aboriginal men, and which one of them isn't envious of you? How could a real man be a coward when it came to cultivation? Besides, it's the same in the dark. Rin Baqian squinted at Shirqing with a face full of hidden bitterness. Aren't your words quite down to earth? It was really easy to talk while standing up. I'll find you 6. Try turning on the lights. However, when he thought about it carefully, he really hadn't seen anyone that was too ugly in the Aboriginals. Actually, Aboriginal men weren't ugly. Rather, they were the valiant type, which suited the Aboriginals' aesthetic standards. As for Aboriginal women, they usually had strong and healthy bodies with excellent figures. Even if their looks were average, their wild nature had a unique flavor to it. As for ugly ones, he really hadn't seen one. This was probably the legendary talent of the race. Just like the legendary Yaksha, the men were extremely ugly, and the women were extremely beautiful. Although the Aboriginals hadn't reached this level, they had the same idea. Therefore, Shirqing probably didn't quite understand what was ugly. Rin Baqian should find a few photos for Shirqing to stick on the wall and see if he could still be ambitious every night. Did Sir congratulate me just now? Rin Baqian immediately changed the topic and guessed. Shirqing had been waiting for him here and congratulating him. He was afraid that the wedding date had been set. Although Rin Baqian had been pondering about the ancient scroll of methods recently, he also knew that everyone in the imperial court was studying his marriage with the Empress. Perhaps it was because the Empress was about to get married that she was at a loss. Recently, she often threw a little tantrum and threw a little tantrum. Although he found it interesting most of the time, he would occasionally have a headache. After all, the Empress wasn't an ordinary woman. An ordinary woman's small fists couldn't kill someone. Sir Run, the wedding date between you and Her Majesty has been set. It will be on the 3rd of March next year, which is 9 months from now. After that, you will have to address her as a prince. Rin Baqian understood that it was exactly as he had guessed. 9 months. It should be the time for the Empress to go to the 60,000 mountains and for him to practice the yang boosting solution. Thank you for informing me, Great Elder. Rin Baqian took a deep breath and smiled. It's all right. I just want to tell you that Her Majesty is the Empress of Dayo and the Aboriginals. Don't let her be sad, Shirqing warned. She is also my Empress. Just like what you said before, millions of Aboriginal men are envious of me. How can I not appreciate my blessings? That's for the best. In fact, I don't have to be so worried. Anyway, you are no match for Her Majesty. Shirqing laughed. However, I've been waiting for you not only to inform you about the wedding date, but also for another matter. Please speak, Great Elder. It's about the betrothal ceremony. We haven't been able to figure out what to do these few days and wanted to ask you if you have any ideas. After all, you're more knowledgeable and smarter, Shirqing said. He then gave Rin Baqian a brief explanation of the Aboriginals' betrothal ceremony. Rin Baqian didn't know that the Aboriginals' betrothal ceremony was actually like this. They actually had to fight their way up. If a few big shots came to block the way, would he be able to exchange a few blows with each of them? Would he be able to enter the palace? He was afraid that the Empress would have to visit his grave. Even if he could really enter the palace, there was still the big boss, the Empress. If the Empress was embarrassed, Rin Baqian couldn't afford to get hurt. He immediately said seriously, actually, Her Majesty can marry me. I don't mind at all. When the time comes, you can just symbolically block Her Majesty. In any case, I definitely won't be able to beat her. How can this be? The Aboriginals have never had such a rule. Great Elder flatly rejected. Rules are set by people. If there is a first, there'll be a second. Besides, who do you think I can beat? Rin Baqian spread his hands. If you're capable, find a few people that I can beat. Then, tie the Empress up and wait for me to collect her. Shirqing frowned and sighed. I feel that you have a lot of ideas and are full of nonsense, so I asked you what you think. However, it is against the rules to let Her Majesty marry you. If I have a child with Her Majesty, what will his surname be? Will it be Run or Chi? Rinpoche asked. Of course it will be Chi. Regardless of whether it's a man or a woman, he will inherit the throne. Sure, Qing answered without hesitation. It was just as Rinpoche had expected. No matter what, if he wanted to inherit the throne, his surname couldn't be Run. Even he felt that this was the case. Of course, he didn't care about this matter. After all, they would be his and the Empress's children. Of course, they could also return to Earth with the surname Run and Dayo with the surname Chi. Or they could have 2 more children and choose one with the surname Rin. However, Rinpoche was a little skeptical because, according to his observation, the fertility of the Aboriginals seemed to be very low, far lower than that of the people of Great Xia and the Yun Nation. For example, the commoners of Great Xia and the Yun Nation could have 5 or 6 children. After all, there wasn't much entertainment at night, and they had nothing better to do. However, the Aboriginals generally only had 1 or 2 children, and at most 3. However, another interesting point was that the experts of other countries didn't have many children either. For example, the experts of Tianjin Basin generally had very few children. Unless they married 17 or 18 concubines and worked hard, they might only have 8 or 10 children in a lifetime. This situation made Rinpoche speculate that the more powerful one was, the harder it was to have children. As a result, he wasn't sure how many children he and the Empress could produce. Chapter 706. Unknowingly, the Black Bamboo Academy had an additional ring of street lights. Electric lights were also hung on the beams of the classrooms and the library. The backyard of the Black Bamboo Academy was expanded again. In the distance, there was an additional courtyard that emitted black smoke all day long. In the courtyard was the most important and special equipment of the Black Bamboo Academy at present, the thermal power generator. Needless to say, the importance of energy was too great for science and technology. What was special was that after this thing was built, it would emit black smoke 24 hours a day, and a layer of dust would fall on the academy every day. Before this, there wasn't any dust on the ground. Fortunately, this thing was only used for testing and improvement. Rinpoche planned to build a power station outside the city to supply electricity to Lan City. At the very least, there would be electric lights. Rinpoche also had another plan, which was to place some LED screens on the streets of Lan City and play some teaching videos. He hoped to use this method to increase the literacy rate of the Aboriginals. At the very least, some ambitious people could learn through this method. When there were more literate people, there would be more readers for newspapers and books in the future. He still couldn't achieve universal education in Dayo, but he hoped to cultivate more talents through this method. The prerequisite for all of this was to have a stable power supply. He couldn't always rely on himself to bring solar panels and batteries from Earth, right? Energy was the foundation of modern society. This was a top priority for Rinpoche, and he had made a lot of preparations for this. Given the price of copper in this world, he was already prepared to use steel core aluminum wire. Then, a very serious problem appeared in front of him. There weren't any aluminum mines in Dayo. Rinpoche then took out the map and looked around. Finally, his gaze fell on the country on the east side of the map. Wealth, population, resources, salt, copper, iron, aluminum. They were all in his hands. It had to be said that sometimes having a good neighbor was indeed a very comforting thing. Rinpoche felt that his family had been busy preparing the vinegar, garlic, exquisite tableware, and napkins for the whole day. Then, he waited for Zedonglai, who had gone to the neighbor's house to borrow crabs, to come back. Before that, he had more important things to do. Even if he followed the Empress to the 60,000 mountains, the place that only existed in other people's stories, it was unknown how vast it was. There were countless talents and treasures, as well as countless aboriginals and ferocious beasts fighting for survival space. It was a place where one could feel a wild aura just by hearing its name. The palace had been preparing for this trip for several days. After all, the journey this time was very long. Even if they rushed at full speed, it would still take more than 2 months to travel back and forth. If he wanted to enter the depths of the 60,000 mountains, it would take a longer time, so he definitely had to prepare more things. The guards accompanying him were winged cavalry warriors. It was said that this trip to the 60,000 mountains was to replenish the number of winged cavalry warriors. Now, there were only slightly more than 600 winged cavalry warriors left, which was less than half of their original strength. Besides the Empress and Run Baqian, there were also Qing Yuan, Hong Wan, Lin Xiaola, and the people from the Imperial Kitchen. As for the students in the academy, most of them had to stay in the academy to complete the modification of the train and the thermal generator. Ren Baqian decided to bring along the 5 students with the best results. Upon hearing this news, many students in the academy lamented. After all, the 60,000 mountains only existed in legends to them. They had never been there before, so it was very attractive to them. Furthermore, following Her Majesty to the 60,000 mountains to see the world was much more interesting than listening to the robots' lectures and experiments at the academy. They didn't expect that only 5 people would be able to go, and that it would be based on their exam results. Most of them knew that it had nothing to do with them. Perhaps only the few people with the best results would have a chance. The top student in the academy was a girl named Shiryu, followed by Shirgan, Su Jinshan, and Gulai. These people were all firmly in the top 5. After that, it was Su Peng, Tonglan, and Xiongji who were fighting for the 5th place. The others didn't have much hope. Don't worry too much. The exam this time is very simple. There are a total of 10 questions, 5 of which are multiple choice questions, and the other 5 are true or false questions. Everyone has a chance. Ren Baqian smiled when he saw the students lamenting. Although he said this, most people still didn't have any confidence and could only resign themselves to fate. After class, Shiryu, Shirgan, and Su Jianshan were surrounded. Everyone's tone was full of envy and jealousy. You guys will definitely be able to go. Not only will you be able to see the world, but you will also be able to show your face in front of Her Majesty. Aren't you thinking too much? How can you show your face? You are just going to see the world. Shirgan chuckled. If there are more questions, it will be hard to say. However, there are only 10 questions, so everyone has a chance. If you're lucky, you can go. Su Jianshan was quite honest. That's easy for you to say. Everyone muttered. Where do they get so much luck? The next day, everyone was dumbfounded when they saw the exam papers. A group of people turned their heads and looked at Su Jianshan. You're so damn right. Even Su Jianshan was dumbfounded. Although everyone had a chance, that was only if they had similar results and didn't know 1 or 2 questions. They might be able to get it by luck. If one could only answer 1 or 2 out of 10 questions, then how much luck would one need to be able to answer them blindly? However, today's exam papers simply exceeded his imagination. It really depended on luck. 1. Among the people below, who is the blackest? 1. Lu Dahua. 2. Sun Honglei. 3. Guo Fuqing. 4. Osama. 2. What was it like today 1 year ago? 1. Cloudy. 2. Rainy. 3. Windy. 4. Cloudy, rainy, windy. 3. Luck is very important. 1. Choose me. 2. Choose me. 3. Choose me. 4. Choose me. Everyone was dumbfounded after reading the entire exam paper. This was different from what they had learned. Who were those 4 people? Who knew what the weather was like today 1 year ago? The third question was even more straightforward. Luck was very important. Even the answers were the same. They had to rely on luck. The rest of the questions weren't much different. After reading the entire paper, no one could remain calm. One by one, they raised their heads and looked at Rinpochian in a daze. Don't look at me. Answer the questions, he said. What are these? Everyone was dumbfounded. Use your wisdom and imagination. I believe in you. He laughed. Everyone looked helpless. They closed their eyes and finished answering the questions. It didn't take more than 10 minutes for them to hand in the exam papers. I know you're wondering why the exam papers are like this. It's completely different from what you have learned, he said after collecting all the exam papers. What I want to tell you is that luck is very important, just like what the third question said. Most of the time, people have no choice but to rely on luck. Therefore, in order to avoid falling into such a situation, you have to master as much as possible so that you don't fall into a situation where you have to rely on luck. In fact, 8 of the questions have real answers, and the answers are in the books in the library. As for the other 2 questions, it really depends on luck. Some people have to do the same experiment 10,000 times before getting the result. Some people get the result on the first try. It's undeniable that this is the role of luck. In addition, luck has many more functions, such as allowing you to survive in various situations. For example, it allows you to always discover the most important things. There are too many functions of luck. In fact, Rinpoche was trying it out this time. When he was pondering how to find the ancient scroll of methods for the past 2 days, he suddenly thought of the Bichi he had seen on Mount Liuzui. After seeing it, many things happened and many people died. However, he was still safe and sound. He was convinced that although luck couldn't be seen or touched, it existed. Therefore, he wanted to see if he could pick out lucky people and see if they could encounter any opportunities in the 60,000 mountains. If it was useful, then he would really have to pick out a few lucky people to find a second volume of the ancient scroll of methods for himself. Rinpoche looked at the dumbfounded expressions of the students, smiled, and flipped through the papers in his hand. Then he stopped at a particular paper, and the smile on his face gradually froze. All 10 questions were correct. Not a single one was wrong, and the name on the paper was Du Laolu. Rinpoche pondered for a while and wondered if Du Laolu's wife was a good husband. Chapter 707. July of the 72nd year of the Dayo calendar. The Empress's carriage left Lan City again. There were nearly 1,000 people and dozens of carriages. There wasn't much food, mainly spices, daily necessities, and some other things. Rinpoche sat in front of the Empress's carriage with a bamboo pole in his hand. A water radish was hung at the tip of the pole, and he hung it 1 meter in front of Chi Shui, the Kirin. "Aren't you tired?" the Empress asked angrily. Rinpoche had been teasing Chi Shui for 2 days. At first, it was meat, then it was fruit, and now it was a water radish that the imperial kitchen chefs brought out from the palace. Chi Shui had such a gentle temper, but now it even raised its hooves when it walked. Rinpoche reckoned that it wasn't far from being kicked. "I saw that it doesn't like meat, so I thought that it might like to eat vegetables." Rinpoche smiled and stuck the bamboo pole on the side of the carriage. The water radish continued to hang in front of Chi Shui. During this trip, the Empress finally got Chi Shui out of the lake after a year to satisfy Rinpoche's curiosity. Rinpoche felt that it should have gills. Otherwise, it wouldn't have stayed at the bottom of the lake for so long. Even whales had to come up to the surface to breathe. However, Chi Shui had been underwater for so long that it was about to grow hair. However, after careful observation, Rinpoche decided to go back and find a rock to press on Darwin's coffin. Rinpoche returned to the carriage and picked up the second volume of the ancient scroll of methods to study. He had read it once when he first got it, but the first page exhausted his energy and almost fainted. After this breakthrough, it was much easier to read it again. Although it was still tiring, it was already within a controllable range. The second volume of the ancient scroll of methods recorded 2 parts, the nourishment technique and the spiritual cultivation technique. The nourishment technique could be practiced at the earth wheel level and focused on nourishing and strengthening the spirit. The spiritual cultivation technique could only be practiced after the spirit wheel level, so he couldn't see the specific content. The words in this ancient scroll seemed to have a magical power. If one wasn't strong enough, they wouldn't be able to read the contents at all. Even if they flipped to the end of the page, they would feel as if all their energy was sucked into it. Only when one's spirit reached a certain level could they break free from this situation. After reading the contents of the first volume of this book, he felt that it was as he had expected. This set of martial arts focused on the spirit. In other words, his future was very likely to be a mage. The premise was that he could find the second half of the ancient scroll of methods. As for this spiritual cultivation technique, it was based on the perception of the 5 elements when he was cultivating Rui visualization to visualize the 5 elements and form a 5-element space. Then, through daily visualization, he would strengthen this space bit by bit, and at the same time, strengthen his own soul. It sounded easy, like playing Minecraft. However, it was very difficult to actually do it. Over the past few days, Rinpoche had repeatedly visualized the giant tree with the wood element, the lake with the water element, and the earth with the earth element. However, every time he relaxed a little, the visualizations would collapse and dissipate. He was completely unable to achieve the solidified reality described in the ancient scroll. As a result, Rinpoche had no choice but to give up on his visualization. Every day, he would carefully study and figure out the meaning of every word. The group walked for 7 days straight before stopping at a small city called Suyong City to rest and reorganize. The last time he broke through to the man-will level, the time it took for him to travel was reduced from 3 days to 2.5 to 5 days. This time, the time it took for him to break through to the earth-will level had indeed changed. Now, the shortest time he could travel was 2 days, and the longest was 7 days. This made it much easier to arrange his time than before. Rinpoche finally felt a little more free, and it was much easier to arrange his time. He didn't have to calculate the day of his return all the time, and he felt less pressured. Rinpoche returned to Earth with the Empress. The Empress went to download a television series while he made arrangements for some martial arts centers. Now that half a year had passed on Earth, the development of the 2 martial arts centers that were overseen by the winged cavalry warriors was much better than he had expected. Even without any advertisements, the small videos that some people secretly shot and circulated within a very small circle had caused an endless stream of people to sign up for the martial arts centers over the past few months. After more than half a year, the total number of disciples in the 2 martial arts centers had exceeded 400. Moreover, most of them were young people from well-to-do families. What surprised him even more was that someone actually contacted him through the martial arts centers and wanted to hire bodyguards. "Brother, look, it's him. I confirmed it. He's the one who wants to hire bodyguards from our martial arts centers." As soon as Rinpoche returned to Earth, Rinwanyin came looking for him and showed him a web page on his phone. "They wanted to contact you directly, but unfortunately, you weren't around," Rinwanyin said with some regret. However, he couldn't hide the excitement in his eyes. Those who could hire bodyguards weren't ordinary people. However, the other party had a higher status and was a well-known tycoon in the country. Rinpoche usually only saw news about them on the news. Now, the other party directly came looking for him. One had to know that their martial arts centers had been established for less than a year, and such a person had already come looking for them. How could this not make him excited? Rinpoche pondered for a while. This was also one of his goals for establishing a martial arts center. He originally thought that it would take a long time for the world to change for this trend to happen, but he didn't expect it to happen so soon. It could be said that as long as Rinpoche nodded, he could establish a certain level of contact with the other party through this method. Furthermore, with this first person, the reputation of his martial arts center would easily spread to certain circles, and it would be much smoother to develop again. Although Rinpoche had always been very confident in the martial arts centers, this was the trend of the future. However, he didn't care about being more famous. If the bodyguards of the world's tycoons were all disciples from his martial arts center, the influence would be obvious. To put it bluntly, he, who controlled the advancement of those disciples, also indirectly controlled the information and lives of most of the tycoons. Unfortunately, this opportunity came too early. If it was a few years later, the martial arts center might really be able to cultivate a group of man-will experts. However, at present, he could only use that group of mountain kids. Rinpoche reckoned that if he really sent the winged cavalry over, even though he would indeed establish a connection with them, this connection would probably be a deadly feud. Other than the Empress, only he could barely command them. If it were anyone else, they would be out of luck. Rinpoche believed in the ability of this group of troublemakers and believed that there was nothing they couldn't mess up. After considering for a full minute, he regretfully rejected the other party's request. It was still too early. "Brother, are you crazy? You actually rejected?" Rin Wanyin asked incredulously. "They naturally came looking for us because we are valuable. What kind of people are we? How strong are we? Don't you understand, after such a long time? There will be opportunities for such things in the future, but not now." Rinpoche shook his head. This news was more of a surprise to him. What he was interested in now was how his small martial arts center entered the eyes of the other party. What Rinpoche didn't know was that even without this martial arts center, he had already entered the eyes of some people. After all, the incident with the Wang family had caused quite a stir in some circles. Some people had already noticed him after understanding some of the unknown things inside. Furthermore, although the people that the nation had gathered were secretive, many of them were martial artists from the outside world. Furthermore, they were martial artists with roots in sections. After a few years, it was inevitable that some information would leak out and be discovered by some people. They were indeed tycoons, and in the eyes of ordinary people, they were existences that needed to be looked up to. However, the Wang family, which inexplicably collapsed, had a high status and strength, but suddenly collapsed without any ability to fight back. In addition to the Chun family, there was also a very powerful faction in the country that inexplicably collapsed. This was inextricably linked to Rinpoche. When these two incidents were added together, it was more terrifying. Ordinary people couldn't detect it, but how could these people be simple? Many of them were omnipotent people, and it was inevitable that they would find out about some things through certain channels or clues. Subsequently, they found out about Rinpoche. It could be said that Rinpoche had long been marked in some people's hearts. He didn't need to think about how to build a relationship with others, but many people wanted to build a relationship with him. However, Rinpoche rarely appeared. Other than some contact with the Chun family, he only had contact with the nation. He had always lived in seclusion, and those people didn't have the opportunity to get in touch with him. Therefore, the martial arts center became the only channel for the outside world to contact him. This time, it was also an attempt, or perhaps a signal. After all, both parties weren't ordinary people, and it was impossible for them to come knocking on his door and say, "Bro, let's be friends. Let's go for a drink and get familiar with each other." Even if Rinpoche sent an ordinary disciple over, this would be considered a response. Unfortunately, Rinpoche didn't know about this and directly rejected the other party's signal. After knowing that he was rejected, the other party wasn't angry. Instead, he was even more certain of what he had learned. How could ordinary people reject them? Chapter 708. After returning from Earth, Rinpoche and the Empress walked around the small city with great interest. Shuyang City was very small and had a population of only tens of thousands. It was the only city within a radius of hundreds of kilometers. Similar to other cities in Dayo, fights could be seen everywhere. People smashed the walls of other people's houses and were chased out. From a two-person fight, it turned into a three-person scuffle. It was very lively, or rather, it was more appropriate to say that it was a chaotic scene. Curses like skin whipping could be heard incessantly. It was said that this was the dialect of a certain village. Rinpoche and the Empress hid their identities and wandered around the city. They even deliberately went to the streets and alleys to read the Lan City Daily that was posted on the bulletin boards to see if anyone was explaining what was written in the newspaper. Although it was called the Lan City Daily, the newspaper had actually spread across more than half of Dayo. Except for the ones in Lan City that were sold, The other places were directly brought by the caravans and posted on the bulletin boards. Rinpoche had already treated this matter as the most basic way to enlighten the people and let them understand the outside world. Therefore, he didn't relax at all, even though he was losing money. In addition, he also saw two familiar signboards in the city: the Imperial Shop and the Dayo business firm. The former mainly sold mirrors, glassware, and spices, while the latter was a shop of the Department of Commerce that temporarily sold soap, pumpkins, sweet potatoes, and potato seeds, as well as wooden chess and gamoku. Rinpoche had to admit that this assistant who recommended himself was indeed very capable. He didn't have to spend too much effort in the Department of Commerce and only needed to control the general direction. The two of them walked around the city for half a day to get a look at the living conditions of the people in the city before setting off again. 5 days later, "Your Majesty, that's Mount Liaotse," Rinpoche said as he pointed to a mountain in the distance. The Empress put down the tablet in her hand and stuck her head out to take a look. Mount Liaotse was shaped like a bowl on the ground. It was said that there was a very powerful being in the belly of the mountain. The first emperor entered the belly of the mountain when he was at the Longevity Heaven realm and returned with serious injuries. After recovering, he led many experts to the depths of the 60,000 mountains and was never heard from again. Although it had been many years and the bones of ordinary people would have turned cold, the Empress knew that the being in the belly of the mountain wasn't dead. This was because it had already existed there for thousands of years before the first emperor. It was unlikely that it would die so coincidentally in just a few decades. The Empress had always wanted to go in and see what kind of existence it was. She also wanted to know where the first emperor had gone. As long as he knew where the first emperor had gone, he would be able to find out where the late emperor had gone. The Empress stuck her head out and looked at the mountain from afar. Her eyes flickered with radiance. After a long time, she retracted her gaze and said faintly, "In the future, I will personally go and take a look. Now is not the time. Perhaps we could get a robot to bring a camera in and take a look?" Rinpoche pondered. "There's no entrance. The entrance from back then had collapsed long ago. We need to dig an entrance first. If we want to dig an exit, we will have to face it directly." The Empress shook her head. "We don't have to get people to dig a hole. Maybe we can find a place to drill a hole, like a brine, the size of 2 fists. Then, we can use a small remote-controlled robot with a camera to enter." The Empress was slightly tempted. If she did this, there was indeed hope for her to see the existence in the belly of the mountain. After thinking for a long time, he said, "It sounds like there's a chance of success. It's a pity that we're in a rush this time. Let's talk about this when we get back." "Okay." Rinpoche nodded cheerfully. Looking at the mountain was like running a horse to death. They saw Mount Liaotse at noon, but it was not until the moon came out that they reached it. It was the place where Rinpoche and the others had stopped before entering the iron mine at Mount Liaotse. There was a small forest and a small stream beside it. Rinpoche jumped down from the carriage, stretched, and pointed to the darkness in the distance. He said to the Empress, "That's where I saw the Beachy the last time. It's said that misfortune and fortune come hand in hand." The following period of time really did. First, there was an earthquake, and I was buried under a house. Then, I was attacked by a huge flower eagle. After killing it, I found a cloud crystal in its stomach. After returning to Lan City, I was assassinated. Your Majesty had to bring me across thousands of kilometers to retrieve the antidote. On the way back, I was surrounded and intercepted by Great Xia. Fortunately, as the saying goes, misfortune and fortune come hand in hand. I'm finally safe. Although he had only been here once, he still had a deep impression of this place. It could be said that this was the starting point of a series of events. Later on, even when he was on Earth, he was first invaded by thieves and then forced by the Jean family. Too many things happened during that period of time, and it seemed that all the bad things had been squeezed together. Fortunately, after half a year in Dayo, he was finally able to settle down. Calculating the time he spent in Dayo and on Earth, it added up to about a year. Just one look, and he was unlucky for a year. This thing was much more powerful than the god of misfortune. You also found an outstanding little white flower here, the Empress continued. Rinpoche was stunned at first. He recalled what happened back then and immediately laughed. After laughing for a long time, Rinpoche said, "When I saw that flower, I thought of your majesty and felt that it was very similar." After everyone had dinner, the Empress rested in the carriage. Rinpoche sat in front of the carriage and told her about what happened the last time he was here. Inevitably, the beachy was mentioned again. Last time, it was attracted by the milk candy. This time, it's so far away that you probably can't see it. Otherwise, I would like to let your majesty see that beachy. It's quite a cute little thing. When the Empress heard what he said, she felt like eating something sweet. She took out a piece of chocolate from the box beside her, tore open the wrapper, and stuffed it into her mouth. It's better not to see it. This time, I'm just going to see my mother. I don't want too many twists and turns, the Empress said casually, although she was also very interested in this kind of magical thing. However, the price that she had to pay was too high. That wasn't some kind of mascot. Not only would she not be lucky if she saw it, but she would also be unlucky. Just as the Empress tore open the second piece of chocolate, her gaze suddenly froze, and she struck Rinpoche's side with a backhand. This sudden movement gave Rinpoche a shock. From the corner of his eye, he saw a small thing flipping in the air to avoid this palm strike. Then it landed on the ground, lowered its body, arched its back, and bared its teeth with a fierce look. Damn! Rinpoche turned his head and was immediately shocked when he saw this little thing. It looked a little like a fox with a red body and a pair of fleshy wings on its back. The Empress frowned and looked at the little thing with a serious face. This is a beachy? Rinpoche nodded in disbelief. Did this thing have a grudge against him? Previously, it was still fine in the mountains, but this time at the foot of the mountains, it actually said that a beachy would arrive in no time. King ran faster than Chow Chow. Why is it here? The Empress's brows were tightly knitted. Just now, the two of them were casually chatting and didn't take it seriously. They didn't expect this thing to actually appear. The meaning of this thing gave even the Empress a headache. Chapter 709. Their actions alarmed the surrounding guards. When they saw that there was a small thing in front of the carriage, everyone was surprised and asked, "What is this?" "It looks like a beachy," someone said after carefully identifying it. After all, this thing had a special shape and was easy to identify. Misfortune and fortune come hand in hand. The surrounding guards were in an uproar. This thing was very famous. Even in the 60,000 mountains, it was extremely mysterious. Moreover, the meaning of this thing made everyone's head throb. However, the beachy didn't react at all to the surrounding people. It kept baring its teeth at the Empress, and the hair on its tail stood up. Rinpoche looked at the beachy and then at the Empress with a headache. Why did this thing appear? He hadn't gotten the white rabbit creamy candy today. Only the Empress ate a piece of chocolate. At the thought of this, Rinpoche carefully looked in the direction of the beachy's gaze and then at the carriage. He took out a piece of white rabbit creamy candy and tore it open. Sure enough, the beachy's gaze immediately shifted to him. Like a flame, it drilled into Rinpoche's arms. He felt his vision blur and felt as if he had been kicked in the face. The white rabbit creamy candy in his hand also disappeared. The flame snatched the white rabbit creamy candy and disappeared into the darkness. Even though Rinpoche was an earth wheel expert, he couldn't keep up with the beachy's speed. It seems like this thing was attracted by sweets again. Rinpoche didn't know whether to laugh or cry. How much did this thing like sweets? It was like this time as well. It's not sweets. The Empress shook her head. No? Rinpoche looked at her inquisitively. From now on, everyone must be vigilant. The Empress ordered the guards before speaking to Rinpoche. If it's sweets, there's honey in the mountains. Why would it come here? To it, this kind of candy might not taste better than honey. Plus, the smell of honey is stronger and can travel farther. Besides, the mountain people often collect honey, and this thing has never been attracted by honey. Rinpoche nodded. What the Empress said made sense. However, It only appeared after the candy was taken out both times. It's like this once and twice. It can't be a coincidence, right? Rinpochian was puzzled. You were there both times, the Empress suddenly said. Rinpochian was taken aback. Your Majesty, what do you mean? It's not necessarily because of the candy. Candy may be a little attractive, but it's only a little. It's impossible to be attracted by candy twice. Also, the smell of the candy wrapper is very faint. Although this thing's sense of smell is sensitive, it shouldn't be this sensitive. I think it might have something to do with you. In fact, you've been lurking in the shadows ever since you arrived here. That's why you suddenly appeared. I'm afraid it was the same last time. Rinpochian pondered for a while and had some doubts about the Empress's words. What do I have to attract it? I don't know, but if you want to know if it's true, it's very simple. Get someone to take the candy and leave now. Tear the paper 5 kilometers away and see if it will appear. As soon as the Empress thought of it, she immediately ordered 4 people to bring candy and leave in 2 different directions. After an hour, the 4 of them returned. Your Majesty, that thing didn't appear, the 4 of them reported. As expected, the Empress nodded her head in understanding. She then looked at the 4 of them and asked, "What's going on with your bodies?" Out of the 4 of them, 2 of them were stained with blood, and the other 2 had some dust on them. It seemed like they had encountered something. The 2 of us encountered a pack of wolves. That's strange. Usually, wolves hate themselves for not running fast enough when they see us. They actually dared to surround us today. The 2 people at the back said. Wild beasts were actually very smart and could measure the strength of both sides. Just the murderous aura from their bodies was enough to deter wild beasts from approaching them. However, today was a little different. A rock rolled down from the mountain in front. If we didn't dodge quickly, we would have been hit. The other 2 people were surprised and sighed. This thing was indeed as evil as the legends said. The effect was immediate. Nothing happened after they set off for more than 10 days. However, something happened immediately after they saw that thing. The Empress and Rinpochian had the same idea. Even though Rinpochian had experienced it before, he felt that it was simply too coincidental. You guys can leave first. Remind the others to be careful even when resting. After the 2 people left, the Empress looked at Rinpochian, took out a piece of chocolate from a box, tore it open, and threw it out of the carriage. A fiery red light flashed, and the piece of chocolate disappeared without a trace before it landed on the ground. Sure enough, it's coming for you. It's following you in the dark. The Empress finally confirmed it. Seeing this scene, Rinpochian was speechless. Although he didn't know what it was doing, it seemed that the Empress was right. However, he was concerned about another matter. Your Majesty, you seem exceptionally wise and mighty today. Rinpochian looked at the Empress curiously. Do you think I'm usually not smart enough? The Empress glanced at him and sneered. How is that possible? To be able to govern Dayo in such an orderly manner, your wisdom isn't something that ordinary people can fathom. I just feel that you rarely consider such trivial matters in the past, but you're actually so concerned about it today, Rinpochian said. In fact, the Empress wasn't usually considered to be extremely smart. After all, the Empress's strongest and most proficient area was her martial arts. She definitely wouldn't think about things that could be solved with martial arts. As for governing the country, there were still the officials in the imperial court. However, the Empress today made Rinpochian feel a little different. She seemed to be possessed by a primary school student. With just one look, she could actually guess that he was the target of that thing. And he didn't realize it at all. I'm just a little concerned, the Empress said. What should we do now? Rinpochian looked at the darkness outside and asked. According to the Empress, that little thing was somewhere in the darkness, looking at him. This kind of feeling really made one's hair stand on end. That thing is too fast, and I can't catch up. Let everyone be on high alert and see how long that thing can follow us. As for what its purpose is, it will be revealed sooner or later, the Empress said. I'm afraid that there will be more twists and turns along the way. Rinpochian had a headache. No one liked natural or man-made disasters along the way. However, given the extent of this thing's evil, it was really possible Fortunately, even if the sky collapsed, there would be someone taller to hold it up. The Empress should be able to protect him, right? By the next morning, the news of the Beachy's appearance had already spread, and almost everyone in the team had heard about it. Even the 5 students from the academy ran to Rinpoche excitedly to confirm. They want to know if this thing was really that evil. After setting out on the road, everyone was still on high alert at first. Fortunately, nothing happened. Half a day later, everyone arrived at a river. Just as the few winged cavalry warriors in the lead stepped onto the wooden bridge, they heard a cracking sound, and the wooden bridge under their feet started to shake. Oh no, run! The few winged cavalry warriors on the bridge were shocked, but it was already too late to escape. Crack! As if it had been in disrepair for a long time, the entire bridge kept making sounds. Then it broke into 2 and collapsed. A few winged cavalry warriors kicked their mounts and leaped into the air. They were then caught and pulled back by the others. However, they could only barely escape. They watched helplessly as the jumping goats fell into the water and immediately set off huge waves. A crocodile that was more than 10 meters long popped its head out of the water and directly bit the jumping goats. Chapter 710. There were 2 types of beachy. One was a beachy, and the other was a beachy. The former was gray, and anyone who saw it would be unlucky. The latter was red, and it was called misfortune and blessing. If there was misfortune, there would be blessings. Rinpoche was stunned when he saw these crocodiles that were more than 10 meters long. He then remembered that he had obtained a cloud crystal from killing a flower eagle. Drag them out and kill them, Rinpoche ordered. He felt that these monsters were here to give him equipment. Why? Just a few bone mines. The Empress looked at him strangely. These things could be seen anywhere there was a big river. Because crocodiles could bite the bones of their prey and roar like thunder, they were called bone mines in Dayo. The Chin Nation was also a place with many crocodiles, and they were called thunder. In Great Xia, crocodiles were called earth dragons. Let's see if there are any gains. Rinpoche turned his head. Misfortunes and blessings go hand in hand. There should also be blessings in misfortune. The Empress immediately understood. At this time, a few winged cavalry warriors found 2 stones the size of a human head and threw them at the crocodiles. Boom! A few stones smashed into the crocodiles, but they were extremely strong. They were fine after being hit by the stones and only sank into the water in pain. This time, they couldn't hit them even if they wanted to. If they were on land, 8 or 10 of these crocodiles wouldn't even be enough to defeat one winged cavalry warrior. However, in the water, it was the complete opposite. Although the aboriginals wouldn't drown if they fell into the water, they were very clumsy and couldn't exert even 10% of their strength. Everyone was at a loss for what to do. Get out of the way. The Empress frowned when she saw that they didn't know what to do. Give me the arrows. The Empress came out of the carriage in a flash with a simple horn bow made of beast horn in her hand. It was the same bow that had been hanging in the carriage. Hong Wan took out a quiver that contained more than 10 dark yellow bone arrows. The Empress pulled one out and knocked it on the arrow. She pulled the bowstring back 2 inches. She took a look at the river and loosened her fingers. The bone arrow made a strange sound and went straight into the water. 1 arrow was shot, and then another. 7 arrows were shot in a row. After the 7th arrow was shot, the river began to turn red. Then a crocodile flipped out of the river, then a second, a third. A pile of crocodile corpses piled together, blood flowing from the crocodile's jaws. The 7 crocodiles looked as if they had been blasted by a cannon. Each of their heads had a wound the size of a bowl. Quick, pull it up, Rinpoche shouted. The winged cavalry immediately chopped down 2 trees and dragged the crocodile from the river to the shore. Each of these crocodiles was 12 to 13 meters long and weighed 5 to 6 tons. It required 2 to 3 people to pull them up. After bringing all 7 of them ashore, everyone followed Rinpoche's instructions and opened up their stomachs. At first, Rinpoche thought that there would be some gains. However, after everyone searched the place thoroughly, there was nothing except for the corpse of the jumping goat. Is there something valuable in the stomachs of these bone mines that we didn't notice? Rinpoche pondered for a while. There was bezoar in a cow's stomach, pig's kidney in a pig's stomach. What was in a crocodile's stomach? Unwilling to give up, Rinpoche rummaged through the pile again. Unfortunately, he still didn't find anything valuable. It seems like the so-called blessing and misfortune aren't so accurate. Rinpoche was a little disappointed. Don't be disappointed so early, the Empress suddenly said. Rinpoche immediately turned his head and asked, "Did your Majesty discover something? It seems like a big guy is coming." The Empress hooked the bow with her little finger and flicked it, causing the bow to spin in the air. "Everyone retreat," the Empress ordered. After the order was passed down, everyone left the riverside. The water churned, and a huge tree trunk floated up from the river. A huge crocodile floated up from the river. Its yellow eyes were filled with ferocity as it stared at everyone on the shore. "What a huge crocodile!" Rinpoche exclaimed. A crocodile that was 12 to 13 meters long was already a huge monster. If it were on Earth, it would be a well-deserved giant beast. However, the head of the one that floated up from the river was almost as big as a car. It was at least 20 meters in length. Following which, the huge crocodile's chin swelled up. It didn't open its mouth, but a thunderous sound came from its body. Following this sound, the surface of the water began to roll outwards in circles. The Empress glanced at the crocodile and said, "Killing the small one has attracted the big one. It might be the smell of blood. It's pretty strong. It seems to be at the Kismet heaven level. If we didn't discover it today, it wouldn't have any natural enemies in the river. Perhaps it would have been able to grow." After saying this, the Empress raised the bow again. Previously, when she shot those crocodiles, the bowstring was only pulled back by 2 inches. This time, she pulled it back by more than half. The huge crocodile seemed to have sensed that something was wrong and immediately lowered its body. However, its fate was sealed the moment it popped its head out to check. The arrow suddenly left the bowstring and pierced through space without making a sound. The crocodile didn't even have time to react before the arrow pierced through its eye and went straight to its brain. Then red and white blood spurted out from its eye. Following which, everyone heard the bowstring vibrate and emit a buzzing sound. "Pull it up." The Empress threw the bow to Hong Wan, who was behind her. This time, it took some effort to pull the crocodile up. This crocodile weighed at least 20 tons. Huge. When the crocodile was pulled up, everyone's first impression was that it was huge. It was simply too huge. It was simply a colossus. Previously, when they were in the river, Rinpoche estimated that the crocodile was more than 20 meters long. Now that it was pulled up, Rinpoche used his footwork to measure that it was at least 24 meters long, which was equivalent to the length of 4 to 5 cars added together. The corpse was lying on the ground and was actually as tall as a person. "Dig it open. We should be able to gain something this time," Rinpoche immediately ordered. Everyone flipped the crocodile over and stabbed its white belly with a knife. It was as if they were stabbing a rock, and it took them a lot of effort to dig open its belly. With the size of this crocodile, everyone would have to jump down to search for it. After spending some time, everyone cleared out the contents of the crocodile's stomach. Their harvest was a huge crocodile heart X1, a huge crocodile penis X1, a huge crocodile internal organs X1, a huge crocodile skin, a huge crocodile skeleton, and several tons of huge crocodile meat. However, there weren't any of the rare treasures that Rinpoche had expected. Instead, everyone realized that this crocodile's skin was practically invulnerable. Even the winged cavalry warriors couldn't cut it with their knives. After feeling disappointed, Rinpoche changed his train of thought. This crocodile's skin seemed to be a good harvest and could be used to make armor. As for the other things, there might really be something good. It was just that he knew too little about crocodiles, so he mistook these treasures for trash. Taking a step back, at least they would have dinner for the next few days. Although this crocodile was shot dead by the Empress as soon as it appeared, The Empress also said that this crocodile had the strength of a Kismet heaven expert. Such a powerful beast would be a great supplement even if it was used as food. Although Rinpoche comforted himself this way, he still sent people to look for the crocodile's nest in the vicinity. Perhaps they could find something. Unfortunately, after searching for half a day, they still didn't find anything. It was already late, so everyone had to set up camp and send some people to cut down trees to build a pontoon bridge. Meanwhile, Rinpoche cut a little of each of the crocodile's heart, internal organs, meat, tail glue, and penis to bring back to Earth. Since there wasn't any other harvest, they could only let the laboratory analyze whether this crocodile had any other value. After bidding farewell to the Empress, Rinpoche got into her carriage and prepared to go back. In the past, he was always in his room or in a hidden place. Now that he was outside, he didn't have to be afraid to do so in the Empress's carriage. In fact, Rinpoche wanted to try something else. If the Empress moved the carriage after he left, would he still be in it when he appeared again? After bidding farewell, Rinpoche used his mind, and the surrounding air began to distort. At this moment, the Empress's expression changed. She saw a streak of red light plunge into Rinpoche's chest. In an instant, Rinpoche disappeared. Along with him disappeared was the Empress's carriage, the thick fur that the Empress used as a bed, the table that held the fruit and wine jugs, and the boxes that held the clothes all fell to the ground. Qin Yuan and Hong Wan were also caught off guard and fell, almost landing face first. The Empress landed in midair and looked at the empty surroundings and the many stunned winged cavalry warriors. Her face was cold and messy in the night wind. Just at this moment, a bolt of lightning split the night sky, followed by a deep rumble of thunder. Your Majesty. The winged cavalry commander, Gong Zheng, stepped forward with a blank look on his face. He really wanted to ask the Empress where the carriage was. Why was the carriage gone? You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.